Chapter 81. A Lesson in Fairness and Courage. Snape was visibly unsettled. The uproar among the students was unlike anything he had encountered before. For years, his teaching style had mirrored the high-pressure tactics Voldemort used with the Death Eaters, terrifying, yet undeniably effective. Under the reign of the Black Devil King, no one had dared to challenge him. Snape had adopted a similar approach with his students, maintaining order through fear rather than respect. This method had served him well, ensuring discipline and high academic standards in his classes. However, the emergence of Blake had changed everything. For the first time, students and even fellow professors were openly opposing him. Dumbledore, observing Snape's discomfort, addressed him with a mixture of concern and disappointment. "I believe this incident should serve as a wake-up call for you. While I understand that adopting a more amiable demeanor may be challenging for you, I do hope you can strive for fairness in your dealings with both students and colleagues. We are all human, after all, with our own emotions and limits." Snape, unable to respond, exited the room, his face ashen. Dumbledore then turned to the restless crowd, raising his hand for silence. "I am aware of your grievances," he began, "and I assure you that Professor Snape will reflect on his actions. To ensure fairness, for the next 2 months, any points deducted by Professor Snape will be reviewed by me. If deemed unjust, they will be reinstated." The students, satisfied with Dumbledore's solution, calmed down. They understood that strictness in itself was not the issue. Professor McGonagall was proof of that. It was Snape's lack of fairness that had incited their frustration. The conversation then shifted to Blake. "And what of Blake?" Cedric inquired. "What will happen to him?" Dumbledore's response was met with cheers. "Blake has done nothing wrong. In fact, his courage and integrity have earned him 150 points from Professor Sprout, a decision I fully support." The hall erupted in applause, particularly from the Hufflepuff students, proud and thrilled by Blake's significant point contribution. However, when the crowd sought Blake to celebrate, he was nowhere to be found. Dumbledore, upon hearing that Blake might have misunderstood the situation and thought he was being expelled, felt a surge of worry. With a house elf at his side, Blake could be anywhere. Dumbledore hurried out of the auditorium, leaving Professor McGonagall and the others to soothe the excited students. The thought of losing such a promising student due to a misunderstanding weighed heavily on him as he searched for Blake, hoping it wasn't too late to clarify the situation and keep him at Hogwarts. Students he has wronged. That's the most important thing. Blake's tone softened, but his resolve was clear. The students deserved to be treated with respect, not disdain or ridicule. Dumbledore nodded, understanding the gravity of Blake's words. "I see your point, Blake. I will have a discussion with Professor Snape about this matter. It's important that all students feel safe and respected at Hogwarts." Blake looked at Dumbledore, a hint of skepticism in his eyes. "I hope you can truly make him understand, Professor. It's not just about me. It's about every student who's ever felt belittled by him." Dumbledore gave Blake a reassuring smile. "I will do my best, Blake. Hogwarts is a place for learning and growth, not fear and resentment. I promise to address this issue with the seriousness it deserves." Feeling somewhat reassured, Blake finally relaxed. "Thank you, Professor Dumbledore. I know I can trust you to handle this." Dumbledore's expression turned solemn. "And Blake, about your earlier concern of leaving Hogwarts and going to Grindelwald's house, I must insist that you stay here at Hogwarts. It's not safe for you to venture there, especially under these circumstances." Blake's eyes widened in realization. "I hadn't thought about the dangers. I was just so upset. Thank you for peeping me, Professor." Dumbledore placed a comforting hand on Blake's shoulder. "You're not alone, Blake. Hogwarts is your home, and we are your family. Together, we'll ensure that you have a safe and nurturing environment to continue your studies." With a newfound sense of belonging, Blake nodded, his spirits lifted. "I'll stay, Professor. Thank you for believing in me and for standing up for what's right." As Dumbledore watched Blake walk back towards the castle, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Blake had shown remarkable courage and integrity, qualities that Dumbledore deeply admired. He knew there were challenges ahead, but with students like Blake, the future of Hogwarts was bright. Dumbledore then turned and made his way to find Professor Snape. It was time for a difficult but necessary conversation, one that would hopefully lead to a more compassionate and understanding Hogwarts. Other students were compelled to apologize to those who had been bullied by him. "Perhaps you're unaware, or maybe it doesn't concern you," Blake continued, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "Over the years, countless students have suffered under his tyranny. I've listened to numerous accounts from upperclassmen about their harrowing experiences. This goes beyond mere criticism from a professor to a student. It's not an overstatement to label it as the actions of a despicable school bully." Blake's words were not without basis. In the original story, Snape was the person Neville Longbottom feared the most, primarily due to his terrifying presence in potions class. Snape's intimidation tactics, point deductions, and even his threat to harm Neville's beloved pet, Raffles, were well documented. Raffles was more than just a pet to Neville. He was family. To Blake, Snape's behavior was undeniably that of a school bully. Yet, because Snape was a professor, his actions were often dismissed as being for the students' own good, leaving them with no one to turn to for help. Many students struggled with potions, but Blake refused to believe Snape's behavior was justified, even if he was Dumbledore's trusted confidant. Standing up, Blake realized he hadn't paid much attention to these issues before, having assumed that strictness in a professor wasn't necessarily bad, as exemplified by Professor McGonagall's own rigorous standards. However, if what Blake suggested was true, that Snape's actions amounted to bullying, Dumbledore's expression turned grave. He understood the implications. "Blake, would you mind returning to your dormitory? Tomorrow is the weekend. Take some time to rest," Dumbledore suggested, his tone serious yet calm. "I'll investigate this matter further. If Snape has indeed crossed the line, I'll know how to address it." Blake nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He knew when to step back, recognizing that escalating the issue might not be wise at the moment. As he made his way back to the castle, Dumbledore hurried off, possibly to confront Snape or to speak with other students to gather more information. Upon Blake's return, he was greeted with an outpouring of support from his fellow students in the auditorium. Led by Fred and George, they lifted him into the air, chanting, "Blake, our king, victory is ours." Their enthusiasm was palpable, a testament to Blake's ability to inspire and unite his peers. Meanwhile, in Nurmengard, Grindelwald seethed with anger, not at Blake but at Dumbledore's handling of the situation. Despite his own dark past, Grindelwald criticized Dumbledore for employing a former Death Eater like Snape and questioned his moral integrity. Yet, he couldn't help but admire Blake's knack for rallying people against a common adversary, seeing a bit of himself in the young wizard. That night, Hufflepuff House celebrated like never before. Even Professor Sprout joined in the festivities, singing and dancing with the students. The reason for their jubilation was clear. Blake had challenged the status quo and stood up to Snape's authoritarianism. The notion that Hufflepuff was merely an academy for idiots was dispelled that night. Blake Green, on the brink of expulsion, had become a hero, leading his house to shed its undeserved reputation and embrace a new identity of resilience and courage. The major academies were clamoring for him, calling him an idiot. Then one must wonder, how extraordinary are you in comparison? Given that the following day was the weekend, with no classes scheduled, the celebration extended well into the night. Blake, undeniably the star of the event, remained until the very end. It was only when he finally reclined on his bed that he felt a slight dizziness wash over him. The common belief was that butterbeer couldn't induce intoxication, yet here he was, feeling slightly off-kilter. After a moment of contemplation, Blake mentally summoned the unique interface only he could access. "System, open the system space," he commanded silently, his voice echoing in the confines of his mind. "I wish to synthesize a treasure chest." This command initiated a process within the mystical system space, a realm where Blake could manipulate certain elements to his advantage, thanks to a mysterious system that had bonded with him. This system, a blend of magic and technology beyond the understanding of the wizarding world, allowed him to perform feats that others could only dream of. The synthesis of a treasure chest was just one of many possibilities, and Blake was eager to see what rewards it would yield this time. Chapter 82, Lucky Potion, New Pets, and Dog Food in the Room of Requirement. In the system space, Blake was greeted by the sight of 3 diamond treasure chests, and with the addition of the one Snape had inadvertently provided earlier, the total came to 4. This progress pleased Blake. He was only 3 chests away from synthesizing a supreme treasure chest. The thought alone set his heart ablaze with anticipation. Next on his agenda was to manage the treasure chests he had accumulated. Thankfully, the system offered a batch selection feature, sparing him the odd looks from his roommates that would inevitably come from tapping aimlessly on his bed. After a short while, the system space was tidied up, with all possible treasure chests synthesized under Blake's careful management. Despite this, the occasional bronze treasure chest would still pop up, courtesy of the few students who were still awake. However, Blake decided to ignore these for the time being. Upon re-evaluating his system space, Blake discovered 2 additional diamond treasure chests, bringing his total to 6. Alongside these were a gold treasure chest and 3 silver treasure chests. In just one day, largely thanks to the incident with Snape, Blake had acquired 3 diamond treasure chests, leaving him just 1 short of the supreme treasure chest. Unable to contain his excitement, Blake contemplated opening the 6 diamond treasure chests right away. However, he ultimately decided to hold off. He had been patient thus far, and now he was only a single diamond treasure chest away from synthesizing a supreme treasure chest. It seemed foolish to give in to temptation now. His attention then shifted to the gold treasure chest. Should I open a gold treasure chest to celebrate? He mused. Ding! Opening the gold treasure chest for the host. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining 50 milliliters of Spirit Blessing Potion, Advanced Version. Spirit Blessing Potion? That's fantastic, Blake exclaimed, but then he paused, puzzled. What does Advanced Version mean? Upon reading the description, Blake's excitement soared. While the standard Spirit Blessing Potion was known colloquially as a lucky potion, it merely enhanced a human's attributes to those of a level 30, clarifying thoughts and aiding in making better decisions. It didn't actually increase luck. The advanced version, however, not only amplified these effects, but also genuinely increased a person's luck. This revelation thrilled Blake. The quality of items from treasure chests of the same grade could vary, and sometimes the outcomes were significantly better. With increased luck from the potion, opening the supreme treasure chest could yield the highest level reward. Eagerly, Blake stored the potion in the system's secure storage, planning to use it when he synthesized the supreme treasure chests. His gaze then fell upon an egg in the system warehouse, a random magical animal egg he had obtained from a golden treasure chest. As the name suggested, the egg could hatch into any magical animal, with the quality and type being entirely random. It could result in a powerful magical creature, or something as innocuous as Poo Rongrong, which was primarily known for its cuteness. Initially, Blake had hesitated to hatch the egg, fearing he might end up with a less desirable magical animal. But now, with the advanced version of the Spirit Blessing Potion in his possession, he reconsidered. Perhaps it was time to see what magical creature awaited him inside the egg. Blessed with a 50-milliliter vial of Blessing Potion, Blake discovered he needed only a single drop to enjoy 12 hours of enhanced luck. The realization banished any thoughts of sleep from his mind. How could I possibly sleep at a time like this? He thought, energized by the potion's potential. Tossing aside his blankets, he sprang to his feet. Blake, where are you going? Wayne, his roommate, asked groggily, barely lifting his head from his pillow. I drank too much water. Just heading to the toilet, Blake lied smugly, slipping out of the room. Once outside, he donned his invisibility cloak and made a beeline for the Room of Requirement, a place where he could safely hatch and raise magical creatures away from prying eyes. The Room of Requirement, as it stood, was perfectly suited for growing magical plants, but Blake had bigger plans. He envisioned a space where magical animals could thrive alongside the flora. To achieve this, he divided the room into 2 distinct areas, ensuring the magical creatures wouldn't accidentally wander into the plant's domain and risk a fiery confrontation with a dragon. Settling into the newly designated area for magical animals, Blake pondered the task of hatching his magical egg. Not one to be deterred, he retrieved the advanced spirit blessing potion and consumed a drop without a second thought. A wave of euphoria washed over him, sharpening his mind and filling him with an unshakable confidence. He recognized this as a side effect of the potion, reminding himself that despite feeling invincible, caution was still necessary. With his body buzzing from the potion's effects, Blake focused his attention back on the egg. Placing it into the system warehouse, he noticed an option to hatch appear. With a confident smile, he clicked it, trusting in the luck the potion had bestowed upon him. Ding! Incubating a random magical animal egg for the host. Ding! The host has successfully hatched the magical animal egg. Blake watched as a small crack appeared on the egg's surface, which had now turned a crystal-clear blue. The crack widened as if something inside was eager to break free. With a final crack and a flash of blue light, Blake shielded his eyes. When he looked again, he was greeted by the sight of a majestic bird, its feathers of vibrant blue, with ice crystals forming at the tips of its wings and a thin layer of frost covering the ground beneath it. The bird regarded Blake with a serene gaze, its call melodious and enchanting. It looks familiar, Blake mused, accessing the pet panel to learn more about his new companion. Assinable points, the 500, strength. The realization dawned on him. He had just become the caretaker of an ice phoenix, a creature of legend. With a sense of awe and responsibility, Blake knew this was the beginning of an extraordinary journey. Blake gazed at the ice phoenix with a sense of pride and accomplishment. Today had indeed been a fruitful day for him, yielding rewards far beyond his expectations. Among these was the ice phoenix, a magnificent creature that emerged from one of the 2 golden treasure chests he had acquired. Blake speculated that this particular chest, which had surprisingly granted him an item surpassing diamond-level rarity, was the very one Snape had left behind after their encounter. The chest had contained an advanced spirit blessing potion, which, upon consumption, led to the hatching of the ice phoenix. The creature's stats were impressive from the outset, boasting attributes that promised immense potential. With the ability to strengthen it daily and gain 3 attribute points each time, Blake was excited about the prospects of enhancing its power even further. Moreover, the Ice Phoenix had the potential to evolve, requiring 100,000 evolution mana for the process. Given the rate at which it could accumulate evolution mana, Blake estimated it would take approximately 4 to 5 years for the evolution to occur. Contemplating a suitable name for the Ice Phoenix, Blake decided on Qing Nu. Inspired by the Chinese mythology goddess known for her dominion over frost and snow. This name, he felt, was more fitting and appealing than any from the Western mythological system, given its purity and lack of scandalous associations. Qing Nu, as the Ice Phoenix was now named, seemed to resonate with her new identity, showing affection towards Blake by gently touching his face. Blake found that despite the icy crystals at the tips of her wings, Qingnu's body was not as cold as he had anticipated. After feeding and strengthening her, Blake left the magical animal area, mindful of the limited duration of the spirit blessing potion's effects. With the potion still active, Blake planned to utilize the remaining time efficiently by reading through all the books in his possession. He was confident that the potion would significantly expedite his reading process. However, just as he was about to delve into his reading, Blake remembered something crucial that he had previously overlooked. After consuming the spirit blessing potion, he recalled how he had fed a box of magical props to his floating cloak, transforming it into a primary stage cloak. This memory sparked an idea. The room of all requests, filled with miscellaneous items left by generations of young wizards, could potentially provide enough material to further evolve his floating cloak. Excited by this realization and the possibilities it presented, Blake, now more appreciative of the spirit blessing potion than ever, hurried out to explore this new opportunity. In the depths of Hogwarts, Blake found himself standing before the room of all requests. With a determined stride, he paced back and forth 3 times, his heart whispering a silent plea. I need a place to hide things. I need a place to hide things. As if in response to his fervent wish, the door to the room of all requests materialized once more. However, the door that appeared before Blake was markedly different from before. Gone was the elegant silver-white metal door, adorned with intricate patterns. In its place stood a simple, unassuming wooden door. Without a moment's hesitation, Blake pushed open the wooden door and stepped inside. The sight that greeted him was nothing short of astonishing. The room was vast, filled to the brim with a chaotic assortment of items that formed towering piles, some reaching as high as the ceiling itself. Blake couldn't help but marvel at the spectacle before him. Shedding his school uniform robe, Blake transformed it back into its cloak form. "Go! Choose the materials you can use for evolution and devour them to your heart's content," he commanded, casting the cloak towards a nearby mountain of items. In an instant, the cloak expanded, enveloping the pile in its entirety. The sound of crunching and chewing filled the air as the cloak set to work. As Blake wandered through the room, his eyes scanned the heaps of discarded objects. Among the clutter, he found broken boxes, decayed picture frames, worn-out sofas, and various magical artifacts that faintly buzzed with residual magic, likely relics from a bygone era whose magical essence had slowly faded away. It wasn't long before Blake's attention was drawn to an unremarkable half-bust statue, hidden beneath a dusty rag. Pulling the cloth away, he discovered a crown shrouded in dust resting atop the statue's head. "Ravenclaw's crown!" he exclaimed, recognizing the artifact despite its transformation into a Horcrux by Voldemort. Without a second thought, Blake secured the crown within the safety of his system warehouse, where the dormant soul fragment it contained could cause no harm. "I'll keep it for now. There will be a chance to use it later," he mused to himself. Suddenly, a burping sound broke the silence, emanating from the cloak. "Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have successfully upgraded the beginner floating cloak, blue version, to the intermediate floating cloak, blue version," announced a voice, followed by another alert. "Ding! The floating cloak has successfully unlocked the floating and flying functions." Blake stood amidst the cluttered treasures of the Room of All Requests, a sense of accomplishment washing over him as he contemplated the newfound abilities of his cloak and the potential uses of Ravenclaw's crown. The adventure within the room had proven fruitful, setting the stage for future endeavors. Chapter 83. The Unique Phoenix of the Dumbledore Family. At that moment, the levitation cloak underwent a remarkable transformation. Its color shifted from the original blue with red borders to a striking half-blue, half-red state. Blake, recalling the cloak, sensed a significant enhancement in its magical power. More importantly, he had unlocked the abilities of levitation and flight. From this day forward, the levitation cloak truly lived up to its name, embodying the essence of levitation and flight. The irony of a levitation cloak that couldn't float was not lost on him. Despite the allure of the many wonders within the Room of Requirement, the cloak seemed to have reached its capacity for the day, unable to absorb any more enchantments. After examining the newly transformed cloak, Blake was eager to test its levitation capabilities. With a flourish, he extended his arms, and the cloak billowed behind him, lifting him gently off the ground. To his delight, the cloak felt like an extension of his body, responding to his commands with ease. He could adjust his speed and direction without expending any of his magical energy. Excited by this newfound freedom, Blake exited the cluttered Room of Requirement and entered another that was dedicated to the care of magical creatures, offering a vast space perfect for testing the cloak's flying capabilities. In this simulated sky, Blake soared, reveling in the joy of flight, with Chingnu, his phoenix, observing curiously from the sidelines. Although the cloak's speed couldn't match that of her phoenix form, it was impressively fast, reaching speeds of over 300 kilometers per hour. Blake's only limitation was the lack of protective gear, which made high-speed flight a windy and somewhat disheveled experience. Satisfied with the cloak's performance, Blake considered the possibilities it opened up. Not only did it offer a faster and more effortless mode of flight than transforming into a bird, but it also provided invisibility, allowing him to conceal his movements without the need for transformation. As night turned into morning, Blake, fueled by the effects of a blessing potion, dedicated his time to studying and advancing his knowledge of magic scroll technology. With no classes on Saturday, He had the luxury of time to delve deeper into his research and Nico LeMay's notes. Cassandra's arrival in the morning caught him by surprise. Concerned about his well-being, she noted his lack of sleep and offered companionship and support. Despite his exhaustion, Blake's determination shone through. His commitment to his studies and the pursuit of magical knowledge was unwavering, driven by a belief in making the most of his youth and the opportunities it presented. Together, they embarked on a day of learning and discovery, with Blake's magical journey taking new and exciting turns, guided by the unique powers of the levitation cloak and the mysteries waiting to be unraveled in the room of requirement. Blake crammed a piece of cake into his mouth, his eyes never leaving the pages of the book he was engrossed in. "It's rare for me to find time to read. I don't want to squander it on sleep, which I find utterly meaningless," he mumbled, his words muffled by the food. Cassandra, who was sitting across from him, rolled her eyes in exasperation. "Could you at least swallow your food before speaking? It's incredibly rude," she chided. "And why must you multitask by reading and eating simultaneously?" Despite her complaints, Blake continued with his habits, devouring his breakfast as if a storm was clearing the skies, then immediately burying himself back into his book. The thrill of seeing his experience points skyrocket was too enticing to resist, and the satisfaction it brought was unparalleled. Cassandra, realizing Blake was lost to his book, pulled out her homework from her backpack, deciding to complete her assignments in the room of all requests. It was a far more comfortable spot than the stifling library. However, her attention was soon captured by a peculiar door in the vast planting field they were in. It seemed out of place, and she wondered why she hadn't noticed it before. "Blake, what's that door for?" she inquired. "Oh, that's my new project for raising magical creatures," Blake replied without looking up from his book. Cassandra felt a twinge of unease. She knew that currently, in the room of all requests, there were no magical creatures. "Why have you decided to start this project?" she asked, her gaze drifting towards a collection of dangerous plants nearby, guessing the type of creatures Blake intended to raise. "Don't tell me you're planning to raise a bunch of eight-eyed giant spiders or something equally horrifying," she said, half jokingly, yet with a hint of genuine concern. Blake glanced at Cassandra, a mischievous smile playing on his lips. "Eight-eyed giant spider? That's nothing. The creature I'm thinking of is far more formidable." Cassandra's face drained of color. "Is there something even more terrifying than the eight-eyed giant spider?" "Of course," Blake chuckled, enjoying the moment. He knew no one would dare claim that the ice phoenix was less terrifying than an eight-eyed giant spider, but he decided to keep Cassandra in suspense. You're not going to let it out, are you?" Cassandra asked, her voice trembling slightly. The thought of encountering a creature more daunting than a giant spider filled her with dread. Blake shook his head. "Unless I open the door, it won't come out. Don't worry, I'll show it to you later." Cassandra frantically waved her hands. "No, I don't want to see it." The mere thought of encountering such a creature was enough to send shivers down her spine. Blake looked at her, puzzled by her reaction. "Why? It's actually quite beautiful." "Beautiful? You said the same thing about the eight-eyed giant spider," Cassandra retorted, her face pale with fear. Blake couldn't help but laugh. "Isn't it, though?" Not waiting for a response, Cassandra quickly stood up and left the room, fearing that Blake might decide to introduce her to his new cute creature sooner than she expected. Once Cassandra had left, Blake shook his head, amused. He had planned to find a more reasonable explanation before revealing his new magical creature, the Ice Phoenix, to her. But for now, he was content with having scared her away. It meant he could enjoy his reading in peace. Returning to his book, Blake reminded himself not to waste the remaining effects of the Spirit Blessing potion. However, by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, as the potion's effects wore off, he felt a sudden heaviness in his body and mind, as if the support he had been relying on had vanished. Acknowledging the end of his productive streak, he put the manuscript away, quickly ate something, and succumbed to the overwhelming tiredness that enveloped him. The time for enhanced learning had passed, at least for now. Dumbledore had just emerged from the Pensieve, his expression clouded with concern. The memories he had witnessed, all belonging to students who had suffered under Severus Snape's harsh tutelage, weighed heavily on him. Initially, Dumbledore had thought Snape's strictness was the issue, but as he delved deeper into the memories, he realized the problem was far more severe. Snape's derogatory remarks about the students and their families were not just strict, they were cruel. In the dimly lit, oppressive atmosphere of the potions classroom, Snape's behavior was not just about being stringent. He targeted certain students, constantly finding fault with their work, deducting points and hurling insults. These students, already struggling with potion studies, found themselves under relentless scrutiny. Snape's lack of patience and tendency to belittle them only served to hinder their learning further. Dumbledore could see the fear in the students' eyes, and it pained him. Potion studies are a profound subject, Dumbledore mused, his heart heavy with regret. Without careful instruction, even the most talented student will find it difficult to excel. And here, without patience, under constant humiliation, even a genius could be reduced to nothing, especially these students who already lack natural talent. Dumbledore's thoughts turned to a conversation he had with Blake, who had pointed out the flaws in Snape's teaching methods. It was clear now that Snape's approach was not about maintaining discipline, it was outright bullying. Dumbledore regretted his previous inaction, realizing that such behavior contributed to a broader issue within the school, including bullying and mental health problems among the students. He even considered his own role in the transformation of Tom Riddle into Voldemort, acknowledging his responsibility in the matter. A professor should embody a noble character, Dumbledore reflected, recalling Blake's words. They teach not just knowledge, but how to conduct oneself. If a professor leads by bullying, what lessons are the students truly learning? Meanwhile, Blake had spent a long day in the room of requirement, resting and tending to his magical plants and creatures. After waking up refreshed in the evening, he busied himself with various tasks before heading to the school's kitchen, where he was warmly greeted by the house elves. As a Hufflepuff, Blake felt at home among the friendly elves who were always ready to provide a meal. Returning to the common room late at night, Blake was surprised to find Dumbledore waiting for him. The headmaster, looking tired but managing a smile, was offered a strawberry cake by a senior student, which he accepted with genuine appreciation. "Hey, you're finally back, Blake," Dumbledore greeted him, setting aside his glass of juice. Blake, taken aback by Dumbledore's presence, felt a surge of nervousness. Why are you here?" he asked, wondering what could have brought the headmaster to the Hufflepuff common room so late at night, especially after his own long day in the room of requirement. Throughout the entire day, Blake's whereabouts had been a mystery, a fact that could potentially raise suspicions with Dumbledore, especially if he thought Blake had secretly met with Grindelwald. "In fact, I can access every common room in the Academy, Blake," Dumbledore revealed, his eyes twinkling behind his glasses. "But I must admit, I have a particular fondness for the Hufflepuff common room. The desserts here are unmatched." Blake, feeling somewhat perplexed by Dumbledore's sudden appearance and cryptic comments, couldn't help but scratch his head. He knew his visit to the Hufflepuff common room wasn't motivated by the desserts. "I've been searching for you all day, Blake," Dumbledore continued, his tone serious yet gentle. "Your roommates have been quite adamant that you only left the dormitory this morning," he added, referring to Wayne and Roger's attempts to cover for Blake's absence. "But you see, I have a way of seeing things that others might overlook." It was clear that despite Wayne and Roger's best efforts to protect their friend, their lies were transparent under Dumbledore's skilled legitimacy. "I did leave last night, Professor. Please, don't hold it against them for lying. They meant well," Blake confessed, his voice tinged with guilt. "And where did you go?" Dumbledore inquired, his gaze steady. "I'm sorry, Professor. I broke the school rules," Blake admitted, his heart heavy. "I went into the Forbidden Forest. I'd heard about the magical creatures there, creatures I've never seen before." To Blake's surprise, a look of relief briefly crossed Dumbledore's face, puzzling him further. He had ventured into the Forbidden Forest, risking his safety, and yet Dumbledore seemed almost relieved. It dawned on Blake that Dumbledore might have feared a far worse scenario, such as a clandestine meeting with Grindelwald. I see. It appears your time in the Forbidden Forest was quite fruitful, Dumbledore remarked softly, a hint of curiosity in his voice. You wouldn't have returned so late otherwise. Blake realized Dumbledore was subtly asking for proof of his adventure, a way to confirm his story without resorting to further intrusion into his mind. The thought crossed Blake's mind that Dumbledore might still harbor doubts about a possible encounter with Grindelwald in the forest. However, if it had been a mere exploration, he would indeed have something to show for it. A smile broke across Blake's face. Indeed, Professor, I gained a lot, he said, enthusiasm lighting up his eyes. I encountered a magnificent creature, unlike anything I've ever seen before. We spent a great deal of time together, which is why my return was so delayed. Dumbledore, momentarily distracted from his strawberry cake, looked up in surprise. Oh? And what kind of creature was this? A unicorn, perhaps? With a sense of pride, Blake extended his arm, and in a flash, a large blue bird materialized upon it. The room fell silent, save for the sound of Dumbledore's fork clattering to the floor. A phoenix? Dumbledore exclaimed, his eyes wide with astonishment. And an ice phoenix at that? A creature I've never had the pleasure of encountering before? The revelation left Dumbledore visibly shocked, yet there was an unmistakable glint of excitement in his eyes. Blake's unexpected companion from the Forbidden Forest had turned an ordinary evening into something quite extraordinary. Chapter 84, The Highest State of Lying. Dumbledore gazed in astonishment at the phoenix perched on Blake's arm. He was no stranger to phoenixes, having encountered many in his lifetime, yet none resembled the creature before him. Phoenixes, in his experience, were creatures of flame, but this one was different. Ding! Extremely shocked emotion detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a diamond treasure chest. Blake was inwardly ecstatic, yet his expression remained unchanged, thanks to the brain seal technique he had employed to fabricate false memories. He had been at a loss about how to explain the phoenix's origin to Dumbledore, but now it seemed the universe had conspired to assist him. I was preparing for bed last night, Blake began, weaving his tale with care, but as soon as I lay down, I felt an irresistible call. I didn't want to break the school rules, but the pull was too strong, rendering me sleepless. Compelled, Blake recounted how he sneaked out of the castle and ventured into the Forbidden Forest. Despite his fear, a sense of belonging, as if tied to his very bloodline, urged him forward until he encountered her. Ice Phoenix Ching Nu, curious, observed Dumbledore, unaware of the narrative her master spun. Yet she sensed a familiar aura from the old man, one that drew her in, albeit not as strongly as Blake's. She introduced herself as Ching Nu, hailing from the Far East, Blake added. She mentioned a special aura I possessed, beneficial to her, leading us to form a contract. Blake described their nocturnal adventures in the Forbidden Forest, carefully avoiding dangerous creatures and gathering magical animal materials, which he now presented to Dumbledore, subtly retrieving them from his system warehouse. Exhausted, I eventually found a spot to rest within the forest, Blake concluded, returning to room 707 this morning to grab a bite in the kitchen. Dumbledore, wise and experienced, found the story hard to believe, yet the evidence was compelling. The Dumbledore family had ancient ties to the Phoenix clan, though the details were murky even to him. Yet Blake's tale, supported by the magical ice phoenix and the collection of magical materials, seemed plausible. So, it is. Dumbledore's face brightened with a smile. He had initially sought Blake for other reasons, fearing Grindelwald might have influenced the boy. Yet, here was Blake, not only unswayed by Grindelwald, but also blessed with a magical encounter and a phoenix companion, a boon Dumbledore knew well. Professor, I'm going to be grounded for venturing into the Forbidden Forest, aren't I? Blake ventured cautiously. Dumbledore smiled warmly, dismissing the concern with a wave of his hand. It's not your fault, Blake. You were led by the Phoenix, and such encounters are beyond our control. This might be the Phoenix's way of choosing you, a rare and fortunate event indeed. Summoning for the Dumbledore family bloodline. You might not be aware, but the Phoenix family excels in spiritual magic, Dumbledore explained, his voice carrying a hint of mystery. I believe it would be quite challenging for you to resist such magic. Blake, puzzled, inquired, then why am I the only one affected by this magic? Don't I share this bloodline too? Dumbledore paused, considering his words carefully. Perhaps it's because I already have Fawkes, and hasn't she mentioned? Being by your side is beneficial for her. I suspect it's related to your unique background. Given your lineage, it's not surprising that your bloodline might have undergone some mutations. Otherwise, summoning a phoenix, especially an ice phoenix, would be out of the ordinary. At that moment, the appearance of the beautiful ice phoenix had attracted the attention of many young wizards and witches in the Hufflepuff common room. The room, usually bustling with diligent students, was now filled with curious eyes. Dumbledore noticed the growing crowd and said, "It seems your phoenix can no longer be kept a secret. In that case, there's no need for secrecy. You're a good lad, Blake. Phoenixes are creatures of pride. Only those with pure hearts can attract them. I must be going now, but remember to treat her well. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. After all, my years with Fawkes have given me a wealth of experience." As Dumbledore departed, his smile lingered. He was reassured that anyone recognized by a phoenix could never follow in Grindelwald's footsteps. Blake, watching Dumbledore leave, scratched his head in confusion. "Professor, why did you come to me?" It seemed the revelation of the phoenix had completely sidetracked Dumbledore, making him forget his original purpose, and even leaving behind a diamond treasure chest in his astonishment. With Dumbledore gone, the young Hufflepuff wizards approached Blake, their curiosity uncontained. "Blake, what kind of bird is this? It's so beautiful." Despite Dumbledore owning a phoenix, few students had ever seen one with their own eyes, as not everyone had a reason to visit the headmaster's office. Thus, many did not recognize the phoenix at first glance. Blake smiled slightly, ready to share his secret. "This is a phoenix, an ice phoenix to be precise." Having passed Dumbledore's scrutiny, Ching-Nu, the ice phoenix, was now officially recognized, removing the need for secrecy. Following this revelation, Blake found himself the recipient of a new wave of treasure chests. However, the excitement among his peers had somewhat diminished due to their growing accustomed to his remarkable achievements. Even the appearance of an ice phoenix, while still astonishing, did not elicit as strong a reaction as before, resulting in a lower drop rate of treasure chests, this time only a bronze one. But the most significant reward came unexpectedly from Dumbledore, a diamond treasure chest from the Supreme Treasure Chest series. After escaping the crowd, Blake found a secluded corner and, with Ching-Nu's help, used Phantom Shift to teleport outside the Everything is Granted shop. Once inside, he settled down and began the process of synthesizing the Supreme Treasure Chest. The synthesis was completed swiftly, and Blake eagerly retrieved a small bottle of the advanced version of the Spirit Blessing Potion from the system warehouse, his spirits high with anticipation. Blake carefully dipped his quill into the small bottle of dragon blood, a material known for its potent magical properties, ideal for crafting potent potions. With a steady hand, he began to inscribe the ancient runic script onto a piece of parchment, his movements precise and deliberate. The dragon blood, rich in magic, seemed to pulsate with energy as it made contact with the parchment, hinting at the potential power of the finished talisman. The realization that had dawned on Blake was inspired by a simple yet profound story he recalled. In the tale, a king, in his concern for his subjects' well-being, contemplated covering the entire country's roads with cowhide to protect their feet from harm. However, a wise man suggested a more practical solution, creating shoes from cowhide for people to wear, thus achieving the same protective effect with far less material. This story, though fictional, illuminated for Blake the essence of efficiency and resourcefulness. Drawing a parallel from the story to his current endeavor, Blake recognized he had been approaching his magic talisman creation with a similar lack of efficiency as the king with his roads. He had been attempting to infuse entire pieces of wood with magic, much like covering roads with cowhide, when a more focused application, akin to creating shoes, would suffice. This insight led him to experiment with using dragon blood on parchment as a more direct and potent method of channeling magical energy. As he finished inscribing the ancient runic script, Blake added an extra stroke, a deliberate flourish that served as a lead to activate the talisman. This innovative approach was not only a testament to his creativity, but also to his ability to synthesize ideas from various sources, including the Eastern Taoist tradition of drawing talismans with cinnabar. The experiment was a leap of faith, blending the mystical with the practical. Blake watched with bated breath as the dragon blood-drenched runes began to glow faintly, a sign that his theory might just work. The parchment, now more than just a piece of paper, held the potential to be a powerful magical artifact, one that could harness the magic within the dragon blood for a focused, potent effect. This moment of innovation was a turning point for Blake, a blend of ancient wisdom, magical lore, and a dash of ingenuity. It was a testament to his growing mastery over the magical arts and his willingness to explore and experiment. The journey from the disappointment of not being able to open the supreme treasure chest to this breakthrough was a reminder that sometimes the most valuable treasures are not those locked within chests, but those discovered through curiosity, learning, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. Blake carefully inscribed 2 ancient runes onto the parchment. The first rune signified big, a symbol devoid of any inherent magical properties. The second rune, however, represented fire and was imbued with magical essence. Blake had previously discovered that when these 2 runes were combined, they transformed the meaning to Great Fire, significantly amplifying the power of the spell. This discovery revealed to him that the usage of these ancient runes bore a striking resemblance to Chinese characters, an aspect he hadn't anticipated. Securing a stone, Blake placed it in an open area and laid the parchment, marked with blood-red ink, atop it. With a sense of anticipation, he activated the rune combination. The process reminded him of lighting a firecracker, a simple action unleashing a potent force. He had unlocked the magic sealed within the dragon's blood, a crucial component of his experiment, and promptly stepped back. Moments later, the parchment adhered to the stone burst into flames, engulfing the stone and leaving it charred black. "It's done," Blake exclaimed, a triumphant smile on his face. His experiment's success opened the door to a new possibility, creating magic scrolls, or more accurately, magical talismans with formidable offensive capabilities, using more affordable materials for the ink. Blake recognized the potential for various combinations of ancient runes to produce different effects. He was determined to delve deeper into this new venture, experimenting with other rune pairings to uncover more powerful and effective magical talismans. This breakthrough not only marked a significant advancement in his magical studies, but also hinted at the untapped potential of ancient runes waiting to be explored. Chapter 85. For Lily. Snape's public apology. That night, Blake stayed in the room of requirement as usual. His sleep was deep and undisturbed, a rarity given his recent adventures, and he didn't wake until the following morning when Cassandra and Hermione arrived simultaneously. They were eager to confirm a rumor that had been circulating about Blake. "They're saying you have a phoenix," Cassandra began, disbelief coloring her tone. "I think they've lost their minds. How could you possibly have a phoenix?" Hermione added, her curiosity evident. "Did you do something that led to this misunderstanding?" Cassandra inquired, both of them bombarding Blake with questions that roused him from his slumber. Rubbing his tousled hair, Blake looked at them, puzzled. "What misunderstanding?" "You having a phoenix," Hermione clarified, a smile playing on her lips. "So what did you do this time?" Scratching his head, Blake replied, "Misunderstanding? Not at all." Cassandra and Hermione exchanged a look of disbelief. "You can't seriously have a phoenix, can you?" Cassandra asked, her voice tinged with incredulity. Realizing the gravity of his next action, Blake said, "I should really take care of her today." "Take care of?" Hermione echoed, confused. "I mean feed her," Blake corrected himself. Extending his right hand, a blue light flashed, and a magnificent, elegant blue bird appeared on his arm. Ding! 2 extremely shocked emotions detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining 2 gold treasure chests. Blake nodded, pleased with the reaction. The appearance of gold treasure chests confirmed that his luck hadn't diminished, even without the elixir of fortune. Cassandra and Hermione were speechless, their mouths agape. You really have a phoenix?" Cassandra stammered, her usual composure shattered by the revelation. In the wizarding world, domesticated phoenixes were exceedingly rare. Dumbledore's fox was one, and Sparkle, the mascot of the New Zealand Quidditch team, the Motora Macaws, was another. And now there appeared to be a third, an ice phoenix no less, which, if Cassandra's memory served her right, was the first of its kind in the world. May I touch it? Cassandra asked, her voice filled with awe. It's her, Cassandra. Phoenixes are very proud creatures, Blake corrected gently. Of course, there are few beings as magnificent as this in the world. His last comment was directed at Ching Nu, the ice phoenix, who preened under the praise, her neck held high in pride. Blake set Ching Nu down, introducing her. Her name is Ching Nu, hailing from the east. By the way, you can feed her. It'll help build a bond. Perhaps she'll even let you touch her, Blake suggested, handing them a bucket of fresh fish. The girls eagerly took the buckets, embarking on the delicate process of earning Ching Nu's trust. Meanwhile, Blake turned his attention to the breakfast left by Beck, savoring the warm coffee as he mulled over his thoughts. Eventually, he began to pen a letter. Snape stood before Dumbledore, his expression unreadable. Have you made a decision, Dumbledore? Dumbledore sighed, the weight of the moment heavy between them. What decision are you referring to? Regarding what to do with me, Snape replied, his voice barely above a whisper. And have you acknowledged your mistake? Dumbledore probed gently. Snape fell silent, the question hanging in the air unanswered. It's a sign of bravery to admit one's mistake, Severus. Remember, you came to me once before, admitting a grave error, Dumbledore reminded him, his tone soft yet firm. Snape's face paled, the mention of his past mistake reopening old wounds. I am grateful for your kindness, Dumbledore. But it seems my presence here only brings discomfort. Everyone at the school despises me. There's no reason for me to stay. Dumbledore regarded Snape quietly, his gaze thoughtful. Perhaps it's time to shift our perspective, Severus. You say everyone here dislikes you, but let me ask you this. Is there a Nion at this school whom you care for? Snape's expression twitched, the question striking a chord. The truth was, there had only ever been one person he cared for, and he had driven her away with his own actions. Severus Snape was tormented by the weight of his past actions, especially the ones that led to the estrangement between him and Lily, the woman he loved most. The sharp pang of regret was almost physical, like a knife twisting in his heart. Dumbledore's words only served to deepen his anguish. Feelings are mutual, Dumbledore had said. If you harbor only hatred for others, then hatred is all you will receive in return. Snape's lips felt raw, as if they might start bleeding at any moment. He was haunted by the what-ifs. If only he hadn't uttered that unforgivable word. If only he hadn't allowed his anger and pride to get the better of him. Perhaps then, Lily might not have severed all ties with him. Yet, deep down, Snape knew that his association with dark forces and his experimentation with black magic had already set them on diverging paths. Dumbledore, observing Snape's silence, stood up and approached him with a proposition that took Snape by surprise. Go apologize, Severus, Dumbledore instructed, suggesting that Snape should seek forgiveness from the students he had wronged. What? Snape responded, disbelief and defiance mingling in his voice. Dumbledore's response was gentle but firm. He offered to accompany Snape, to apologize on his behalf first, acknowledging his own oversight in not detecting Snape's struggles sooner. This gesture of solidarity shocked Snape, who had expected dismissal or punishment, not an offer of redemption. You could have just fired me, Snape protested, but Dumbledore's next words stopped him in his tracks. The mention of Lily's child and the potential danger of leaving Hogwarts made Snape reconsider. With a heavy heart and a sense of duty, Snape followed Dumbledore, ready to face the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, in the bustling atmosphere of the Hogwarts dining hall, Blake and his friends navigated their way through the crowded space. Cedric Diggory, eager to discuss Blake's phoenix, was quickly silenced by Blake's preemptive answers, showcasing their playful camaraderie. However, their banter was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Dumbledore and Snape, drawing the attention of everyone in the hall. The atmosphere shifted as students and faculty alike turned their focus to the two figures. Snape's absence had been noted, and his return sparked a flurry of whispers and speculation. Harry Potter, Ronald Weasley, and Hermione Granger, among others, watched closely, wondering if this marked the end of Snape's tenure at Hogwarts. As Dumbledore and Snape prepared to address the assembly, the tension was palpable. This moment was not just about Snape's future at Hogwarts. It was a test of the school's capacity for forgiveness and understanding. The silence that had fallen over the hall was a testament to the gravity of the situation, a moment that would undoubtedly leave its mark on the hearts and minds of all present. Hermione looked at both Harry and Ron with a mix of frustration and disdain. "Can't you use your brains for once?" she said, her voice tinged with helplessness. Even if Professor Dumbledore had any intention of dismissing Snape, he certainly wouldn't announce it publicly. And if Snape were aware of his impending dismissal, why would he show himself in front of everyone? "Haven't you embarrassed yourselves enough?" Harry and Ron exchanged glances, unable to refute Hermione's logic. Despite knowing she was right, they couldn't help but feel irked by her tone. "I only thought she was cute for a couple of days," Harry muttered under his breath. At that moment, Dumbledore cleared his throat loudly, drawing the attention of the entire hall. With a flick of his wand, he amplified his voice. "Please, everyone, quiet down!" His command instantly hushed the noisy auditorium. "I apologize for interrupting your meal, but there are important matters I need to address," Dumbledore began, his gaze sweeping across the room. "In the past, I have been negligent in overseeing how our professors interact with students. This oversight has led to some students being mistreated," Dumbledore admitted, his tone somber. "As the headmaster, I bear a significant portion of the blame for this. I would like to take this opportunity to apologize to those affected." With that, Dumbledore bowed respectfully towards the students, a gesture that took many by surprise. Straightening up, he continued, "I promise from this day forward to closely monitor the teaching methods of all professors. I will not tolerate any form of unfair treatment, targeting, or bullying of students by our faculty." The hall erupted into applause at Dumbledore's declaration, but he quickly gestured for silence before proceeding. "Now I believe Professor Snape has something he wishes to say," Dumbledore said, stepping aside to give Snape the floor. Snape, with a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, stepped forward. Facing the sea of expectant eyes, he hesitated, finding the situation overwhelmingly difficult. But then, spotting a pair of familiar eyes in the crowd, he found a sliver of courage. "Would like to express my sincere apologies to those students whom I have treated unfairly or insulted in the past," Snape stuttered, his delivery more halting than even Professor Quirrell's had been. After a brief pause, he added, "I sincerely apologize. I promise in future classes I will not repeat these mistakes." With that, Snape glanced briefly at Dumbledore and the silent students before turning to leave the auditorium. Dumbledore watched him go, a complex look in his eyes. He understood the necessity of Snape's presence at Hogwarts, given his unique insight into Voldemort. Turning back to the students, Dumbledore said, "You all heard Professor Snape's apology. I ask that you give him a chance. I will personally ensure he adheres to our standards, striving for a fair and harmonious learning environment for everyone." Meanwhile, at the Hufflepuff table, Blake was thoroughly enjoying his dessert, having taken advantage of Cedric's distraction by Snape's apology to finish off the pudding. To him, the apology was expected. Desserts were far more interesting. He had known all along that Snape would never leave Hogwarts. Dumbledore needed someone who was intimately familiar with Voldemort, and Snape was the only suitable candidate. Thus, Snape had no choice but to quickly resolve the situation by publicly apologizing and seeking forgiveness. Dumbledore's own apology was a strategic move to facilitate this, leaving Snape with no option but to comply, especially if it meant ensuring Harry's safety and maintaining his position at Hogwarts to protect it. When Harry and the other students encountered Snape, they had already offered their apologies. Both the headmaster and Snape had assured everyone that such an incident would never recur. With these assurances, the matter was effectively resolved. This resolution promised a more pleasant future for Neville, Harry, and their friends. However, the peace was momentarily disrupted by a playful squabble among the students. "Ah, Blake, you launched a sneak attack on my pudding," exclaimed one student in mock outrage. "That's my pudding, Blake," another student protested, trying to reclaim the dessert. The atmosphere, despite the playful dispute over pudding, was light-hearted and filled with laughter. The students' interactions were a testament to their strengthened bonds and the promise of more joyful days at Hogwarts. Chapter 86, An Ordinary Elf Ball? This is anything but mediocre. In the days that followed, life seemed to fall into a monotonous rhythm, with one notable exception. Debao, Blake's beloved companion, had finally accumulated enough experience to evolve. Seizing the opportunity, Blake stealthily made his way to the cave that Big Bear called home. Over the past few days, Big Bear appeared to have grown slightly larger, a testament to the enhancements and attribute points Blake had invested in him. His brown fur glistened healthily, a sight that would make anyone believe he was well-nourished. Hagrid, in particular, was convinced that his feeding regimen was the secret to Big Bear's impressive growth. Blake, however, knew better than to correct this misconception. Upon his arrival, Big Bear expressed a sense of boredom and a desire for companionship, specifically mentioning a second bear. Blake, with a hint of mischief, suggested that Big Bear could find such a companion in the Forbidden Forest, despite Big Bear's reservations about the dangers lurking within. Blake reassured Big Bear, emphasizing that he was no ordinary bear. After tonight, he would be able to roam the Forbidden Forest without fear. This was a pivotal moment for both Blake and Big Bear, as Big Bear was among the first of Blake's creatures to meet the conditions for evolution. Blake reviewed Big Bear's attributes, noting the significant improvements made over the past few days. The additional points had been allocated to magic defense, raising it from 82 to 91. With just one more enhancement, Big Bear would surpass the 2,000 points threshold required for evolution. As Blake prepared to initiate the evolution process, Big Bear expressed his readiness, albeit with a humorous concern about growing a brain. Blake, suppressing a smile at Big Bear's comment, began to channel his druid mana into Big Bear. Soon, Big Bear's body glowed with a red light, signaling the start of the transformation. However, Blake encountered an unexpected limitation. Despite his efforts, he could no longer infuse Big Bear with mana. It was as if Big Bear's body had reached its capacity. Checking the attribute panel, Blake confirmed that the evolution magic power had indeed hit the 2,000-point mark. Without hesitation, Blake pressed the evolution button as Big Bear began to feel increasingly uncomfortable. A series of notifications confirmed the start of the magical evolution process. As the evolution unfolded, Big Bear's form began to change. The air around them crackled with magical energy, a testament to the extraordinary transformation taking place. This was no ordinary evolution. It was a moment that would redefine what Big Bear was capable of and open up new possibilities for adventures in the Forbidden Forest. Blake watched in awe, knowing that after tonight, Big Bear would no longer be just any bear. He would be a creature of magic, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with newfound strength and abilities. Success was achieved within the confines of the bear cave, its interior bathed in a rich red glow. To ensure utmost safety, Blake had initiated the evolution process of Big Bear within the den, taking precautions to block the entrance and cast a spell to contain all sounds within. Despite the brilliance of the red light, it was confined to the cave, preventing any potential alarm. As the red light transformed into a mist, it enveloped Big Bear, slowly seeping into his form. This process culminated in the formation of a thick, red cocoon encasing Big Bear. Blake, closely monitoring the situation, noticed the attribute panel's numbers spiraling wildly, blurring from the rapid changes until they settled into question marks. With a crackling sound, the cocoon broke open, revealing a transformed Big Bear, now with attributes clearly defined on the panel. Fire Bear, assignable points 3, physical strength 100, power 250, speed 110, endurance 120, IX 179, physical defense 200, magic defense 500. Existing skills: Slap, Brutal Charge, F, Adal Bite, Awaken Special Skills, Fire Magic, Lightning Speed. Evolution Magic Power required for the next level of evolution. Potential exhausted, unable to evolve. Existing Evolution Magic Power 0. Reset attribute points. Can spend Evolution Magic Power to reset. Blake was astounded by the transformation. Big Bear's attributes had soared from double to triple digits, with the magic defense receiving an especially significant boost, matching that of an Ice Phoenix at 500. Moreover, Big Bear's speed had impressively increased to 110, with a special skill, Lightning Speed, that could quintuple this speed for a minute once a day, nearly rivaling the Phoenix's speed. Overall, it's pretty good, Blake remarked, satisfied. He allocated the 3 newly earned attribute points to Big Bear's attack power, considering the magic defense sufficiently high for the moment. Suddenly, Blake narrowly avoided a large fireball spat out by Big Bear, who apologized, expressing a newfound surge of energy and confidence in his enhanced appearance and strength. Blake acknowledged Big Bear's capabilities, now formidable enough to navigate the Forbidden Forest independently. Despite reaching the limit of its evolutionary potential, Big Bear had become a force to be reckoned with among magical creatures. With the experiment's data firmly etched in his memory, Blake gave Big Bear his blessing to make the Forbidden Forest his new home, no longer requiring his return. Big Bear, now a fiery figure, vanished into the forest's depths, agreeing to be summoned if needed. Blake then made his way to Hagrid's cabin, planning to inform him of Big Bear's release into the forest, thus avoiding any suspicion. The transformation from an ordinary bear to a magical creature had been swift and remarkable, marking a significant achievement in Blake's magical endeavors. Blake, after a long day filled with classes and Quidditch practice, found himself once again in the room of requirement. It had been 72 hours since he last consumed the Spirit Blessing Potion, meaning he was now eligible to open the Supreme Treasure Chest. Eagerly, he consumed another dose of the Advanced Spirit Blessing Potion, reveling in the familiar, mysterious sensation it brought. With high hopes, he wished for a reward that would be immediately useful, unlike the ancient magic he had previously obtained, which, despite its power, remained unused due to the peaceful conditions at Hogwarts. Wasting no time, Blake summoned the system space, where the Supreme Treasure Chest awaited, glowing invitingly. "System, open the Supreme Treasure Chest for me," he commanded. "Ding! Opening the Supreme Treasure Chest for the host," the system responded, followed by "Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining an ordinary Pokeball blueprint." Blake was momentarily taken aback, wondering if perhaps the potion had expired or if he had somehow consumed the wrong one. "What the hell is an ordinary Pokeball?" he muttered, demanding to see the item description. The blueprint described an ordinary Pokeball that, with the right materials, could be replicated endlessly. Despite its seemingly mundane functions, forcefully taming any magical animal, storing it without the need for feeding, and allowing the animal to learn new skills in dream-induced alternate worlds, Blake initially doubted its value. However, upon further reflection, Blake realized the incredible potential of the Pokeball. It would alleviate the daily effort of strengthening his magical animal and eliminate the need to house it in the room of requirement. The prospect of Big Bear evolving and learning new skills while essentially just sleeping was particularly enticing, not to mention the convenience of not needing to feed the animal. Overwhelmed with excitement, Blake momentarily worried about the cost of the materials required for the Pokeball's creation. His concern quickly turned to joy upon discovering that the materials were not only abundant, but also inexpensive. The seemingly mediocre Pokeball was, in fact, an extraordinary find, promising to revolutionize the way he interacted with his magical animal companions. Blake scrutinized the list of materials displayed on the system panel with a critical eye. Although none of the items were particularly rare or costly, acquiring them swiftly posed a challenge. As a minor magus, he found that not all materials were readily accessible for purchase. The thought of seeking assistance from Dumbledore crossed his mind, but he quickly dismissed it, anticipating the cumbersome task of explaining his needs. Resorting to an alternative, Blake retrieved a notebook from his pocket and penned a message: "I seek certain materials for alchemy practice." Moments later, the ink faded, and a response materialized on the page. "Materials for alchemy? Is Dumbledore, that venerable figure, unwilling to provide you with what you need?" Blake clarified, "It's for a personal project. It might be best if he remains unaware." The reply came swiftly, tinged with intrigue. "A secret project? Very well. Send Baker with your list. I'll procure everything you need within a day. Remember, the nature of power, and by extension alchemical items, is neutral. It's not bound by notions of good and evil, unlike Dumbledore's occasional oversight. To ensure your request remains confidential, I'll have Gucci deliver the materials directly. How many sets do you require? 2 or 3 should suffice, Blake responded before closing the notebook. Left with no other option, Blake had to rely on Grindelwald for the materials. His current project, the creation of a pokeball, demanded resources that were beyond his immediate reach. The potential of this device intrigued him. If it worked as anticipated, it could significantly accelerate the evolution of the Ice Phoenix, potentially reducing the waiting period from years to mere moments. Chapter 87. The Lucky Potion Formula. A Plot Against the Philosopher's Stone. Blake gazed at the blueprint of the Pokeball, his heart filled with anticipation. Unfortunately, he was currently lacking the necessary materials. However, he pondered whether, given sufficient materials, he could synthesize it directly in the system, or if he would need to undertake the task himself. Activating the synthesis system, Blake was greeted by the Pokeball blueprint within the system interface, indicating that direct synthesis was indeed possible. A system prompt then chimed in, "Ding! Equipment or items synthesized by the system are guaranteed to be of standard quality." Another prompt followed, "Ding! If the host opts to craft the items personally, there is a chance to obtain higher quality equipment or items. However, there is also a risk of failure or producing an item of inferior quality." Blake stroked his chin thoughtfully. So, the system synthesis provided a safety net for quality, but personal crafting offered the gamble of achieving superior quality or facing potential failure. It seemed that honing his alchemy skills was still a necessity. After all, who wouldn't dream of possessing a full set of legendary golden equipment in the future? Yet, at this stage, crafting the finest golden legendary equipment was out of reach, so relying on the system's guaranteed quality was the practical choice for now, especially for items like the Pokeball. Given the limited materials, securing a few of standard quality was sufficient for now. He planned to encapsulate his most powerful pets within them and reserve a few to capture a ferocious magical creature from the Forbidden Forest. Although Blake could transform magical animals using his druid ability, the process was exceedingly laborious. If he encountered a formidable magical creature, the effort and resources required for taming it through brainwashing would be significantly higher. The Pokeball offered a more convenient solution. Filled with anticipation, Blake stored the blueprint in the system space and proceeded to synthesize the treasure chests he had accumulated over the days, resulting in 2 golden treasure chests. Without hesitation, Blake opened them, confident that with the Lucky Potion's blessing, even a golden treasure chest would yield something valuable. Ding! Opening the golden treasure chest for the host. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining an ice crystal bracelet blueprint. Ding! Opening the golden treasure chest for the host. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a Lucky Potion, Advanced Spirit Blessing Potion, Magic Potion Formula. Blake's eyes widened at the mention of the Lucky Potion Formula, immediately overlooking the blueprint. The availability of the Lucky Potion Formula meant he could now concoct this incredibly effective potion himself. This potion had the power to genuinely enhance one's luck, and most importantly, it could be consumed repeatedly every 72 hours without the adverse side effects associated with the original Spirit Blessing Potion. Even a potion master like Slughorn had only managed to brew the Spirit Blessing Potion twice in his lifetime. Eagerly, Blake reviewed the Lucky Potion recipe and compared it to the Spirit Blessing Potion's formula. Despite his beginner-level potioneering mastery, he was familiar with the latter's recipe. Upon comparison, he noticed that while the Lucky Potion shared some similarities with the Spirit Blessing Potion, several ingredients had been altered. For instance, 1 drop of blood from a 3-month-old unicorn was substituted with 3 drops of phoenix tears, and 1 foot of unicorn horn was replaced with 1 gram of unicorn horn powder. Moreover, the brewing time for the Lucky Potion was significantly shorter than that of the original Spirit Blessing Potion. This discovery underscored the unique and potent nature of the Lucky Potion, setting the stage for Blake's next adventures and schemes, particularly those involving the Philosopher's Stone. The creation of the original Spirit Blessing Potion was a meticulous process that spanned over 6 months. Any deviation from the precise steps could render the entire effort futile. However, the luck potion, with its potent effects, required only 3 months to brew. Despite the lengthy preparation time, its benefits far outweighed the investment. By preparing additional materials in advance, multiple batches could be brewed simultaneously, ensuring a satisfactory yield even if some attempts failed. Among the various ingredients, phoenix tears were the most challenging to procure. Yet Blake had a unique advantage in obtaining them, either through Ching-Nu's willingness to shed tears or by persuading Fox, who was unlikely to refuse his request. After some time, Ye Kelly, with a drool at the corner of his mouth, examined the blueprint of an ordinary ice crystal bracelet. The bracelet promised warmth in winter, coolness in summer, the ability to change shape at will, enhanced magical power reserve and recovery speed, increased spell power, and the capability to activate a magic shield against most attacks. The attributes were indeed impressive. Following the consumption of the luck potion, Blake opened a treasure chest and was rewarded with valuable items, including sufficient materials to craft several bracelets. Opting not to use the system's synthesis function, which guaranteed only normal quality, Blake decided to craft the bracelets himself. Given his enhanced luck from the potion and his not insignificant alchemy skills, he was confident in producing high-quality equipment. Upon preparing the materials, Blake set aside the mithril, initially intended as the main component, inspired by a hint from the luck potion to use a superior material. Blake then requested a feather from Ching-Nu, who watched him with curiosity. Dividing the feather into 3 parts, he commenced his alchemy, his first attempt since learning the craft. Despite some initial clumsiness, the luck potion's effect ensured a smooth operation, resulting in 3 exquisite blue bracelets of the highest quality, as confirmed by the system. Blake admired the cold, lightweight feel of the bracelets, now made from ice phoenix feathers instead of mithril. Replacing his watch with one of the bracelets, he marveled as it transformed into a watch shape on his wrist, capable of telling time like any ordinary watch. Testing the bracelet's defensive capabilities, Blake activated a transparent shield, impressed by its effectiveness. Praising Ching-Nu for the strength of her feathers, Blake received a proud chirp in response, her vanity stroked by his compliments. In Dumbledore's office, Blake presented a letter to the professor, requesting his assistance in delivering it to a friend who had previously sought a manuscript from Dumbledore. The professor glanced at the letter on his desk, intrigued by Blake's request. Blake asked curiously, "Is it because the manuscript is too challenging, so you—" "That's not it," Dumbledore interjected gently. "It's just that while reading the previous content, I stumbled upon some new ideas. That's why I jotted these ideas down. I wanted to see if they would work and if my assumptions were incorrect," Blake explained. Dumbledore smiled warmly. "Actually, I have a fair bit of knowledge about alchemy. Maybe I can assist you." Blake nodded, visibly relieved. "I wanted to consult you, but considering how busy you are, I hesitated." Dumbledore shook his head, dismissing Blake's concern. "I always have time for you, Blake." Touched by Dumbledore's words, Blake retrieved a piece of parchment from his pocket. "I've outlined my questions and new ideas at the top, but—" Dumbledore's interest was piqued as he took the parchment from Blake, eager to delve into the young wizard's thoughts. Initially, Dumbledore believed he could easily address Blake's queries without much effort. However, as he began to read, he realized that Blake's inquiries and ideas touched upon areas of alchemy that even he, despite his vast knowledge, was unfamiliar with. This revelation was somewhat embarrassing for Dumbledore, who had just assured Blake of his ability to help. Blake, for his part, had no intention of challenging Dumbledore. His questions stemmed from a genuine curiosity and a desire to deepen his understanding of alchemy, inspired by Dumbledore's own writings. Dumbledore sighed, a mix of admiration and humility in his voice. "I didn't expect your understanding of alchemy to have advanced so significantly. You've grasped everything I know and even ventured into territories I'm unfamiliar with." "It seems I can't solve your problems after all," Dumbledore admitted, placing the parchment back on the table. Blake responded with a smile. "Professor, you're being too modest." In truth, Blake had come to appreciate the profound significance of alchemy. His decision to write to Nico Lamour was driven by a desire to accelerate his progress and forge a connection with the legendary alchemist. Blake believed that if anyone could elevate his alchemy skills to new heights, it would be Nico Lamore. Blake also harbored hopes that the Philosopher's Stone would remain intact. The premature demise of such a legendary figure as Nico Lamore, should the stone be destroyed, would be a tremendous loss. Beyond personal ambitions, Blake felt it would be a tragedy for the world of alchemy if the Philosopher's Stone was carelessly lost. Unaware of Blake's interest in the Philosopher's Stone, Dumbledore agreed to help Blake send his letter to Nico Lamore. As Blake left the headmaster's office, he felt a sense of accomplishment. At just 11 years old, his proficiency in alchemy was already attracting attention. Blake was confident that the inclusion of an ice crystal bracelet, one of his finest alchemical creations, in the envelope would surely catch Nico Lamore's eye. Blake left Dumbledore's office with a sense of purpose, hopeful for the future and the potential mentorship of Nico Lamore. Blake made his way to the Hufflepuff common room, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He was preoccupied with the daunting task of safeguarding the Philosopher's Stone and devising a plan to save Nico Lamore's life. As he walked, lost in thought, Cassandra approached him, a book clutched in her hand, clearly just out of class. Accompanied by a few Slytherin girls, she halted Blake's progress. The girls, sensing the tension, giggled and dispersed. "Hey, why do you look so preoccupied?" Cassandra inquired, her curiosity piqued. "Oh, nothing, just pondering over some things," Blake replied, trying to sound nonchalant. "Really? Mulling over your next mischievous plan, perhaps?" Cassandra teased, a playful glint in her eye. "What? No, of course not. Everyone knows I'm a model Hufflepuff. I wouldn't dream of causing trouble," Blake retorted, his gaze shifting around guiltily. "Do you even believe yourself? Should I remind the professors of all the good deeds you've orchestrated?" Cassandra challenged, her tone laced with sarcasm. "No, it's we. Remember, we've been partners in crime. If you spill the beans, we're both in hot water," Blake countered with a grin, attempting to lighten the mood. "Who's we? I'm not getting dragged down with you," Cassandra exclaimed, feigning indignation. "Ha! Let's drop it. I've got a lot on my mind," Blake said, waving off the conversation. He quickly changed the subject and made his escape, leaving Cassandra staring after him, her suspicions aroused. Indeed, Blake was harboring a secret plan. Ever since he had acquired the map of magical creature habitats, he had been itching to capture some magical beasts. However, previous commitments had kept him from pursuing this venture. Now, determined to act, he planned to venture into the Forbidden Forest that very night. Before the invention of the Pokeball, he aimed to capture smaller, more manageable magical creatures that could be easily tamed. Creatures that possessed the ability to charm and disarm were particularly appealing to him, as they could prove invaluable in unlocking treasure chests when the time was right. "Perhaps I should consider getting a suitcase like Newt's?" Blake mused, pondering the practicality of such an accessory. But Dumbledore hasn't approved of that idea yet. Better wait for the Pokeball," he concluded, momentarily lost in thought. Just then, Fox's shadow flitted across the castle, 2 letters clutched in his mouth. One of them was addressed to Blake, pulling him back from his reverie and into the unfolding events. Chapter 88, A Visit to Hagrid. In the quiet of the night, Blake carefully packed his completed transfiguration thesis into his bag before standing up, ready to venture out of the dormitory. "Blake, where are you heading?" one of his roommates inquired curiously. "Just feeling a bit peckish. I'm off to the kitchen to scrounge up something to eat," Blake replied nonchalantly. "Could you grab me 2 pumpkin pies while you're at it?" another roommate asked, hopeful. "And I'd love a piece of fried steak. Oh, and 2 cups of pumpkin juice, please," added another. With a chorus of thanks and the title of Godfather amusingly bestowed upon him by his grateful, albeit lazy roommates, Blake left the dormitory. Debow, his pet, merely turned over in its small bed, continuing its slumber, well-fed and content from the attention it received from the senior students at the academy. As Blake stepped out, he snapped his fingers, summoning Baker with a soft "Pah!" Baker materialized in front of him, attentive. "You've heard their requests. Pretend to be a school elf for a bit and deliver those for me, will you? I've got something else to take care of," Blake instructed. "Of course, young master," Baker replied before disappearing with another snap of his fingers. Blake then made his way out of the common room, and with the sky not yet fully darkened, he stealthily exited the castle. There was no curfew in effect yet, and he felt no need to use an invisibility charm. After all, Dumbledore was well aware of his frequent visits to Hagrid for tea. However, Blake's true intention that evening was not just for a casual visit. He sought Hagrid's help in acquiring a unicorn horn, a crucial ingredient for a luck potion he was keen on brewing. The Forbidden Forest, known for its magical creatures, was a likely place to find one. Blake was determined to obtain the horn ethically, preferring those from unicorns that had passed naturally over those sourced from the darker dealings in Nocturne Alley. Hagrid, with her years of experience at Hogwarts and a knack for magical creatures, might have come across a unicorn horn. Blake pondered the possibility as he approached Hagrid's hut, his thoughts briefly wandering to the eccentric ways Hagrid might have used unicorn hair in the past. Unaware that another figure had also emerged from the castle, Blake knocked on Hagrid's door, only to be greeted by the barking of Hagrid's hound. Hagrid welcomed him warmly, and Blake was immediately confronted by the dog's fierce demeanor, which belied its actual timidity. Ignoring the barking, Blake skillfully calmed the dog with a few strokes and a peculiar command. "Love horse kills chicken." The dog instantly relaxed, rolling its eyes back in bliss. Hagrid watched in astonishment as Blake explained his knowledge of magical animal massage techniques, which he had learned from books and personal experimentation. The conversation shifted to magical creatures as Hagrid poured tea, expressing doubt in her ability to master the massage technique, but acknowledging Blake's expertise. As the dog, now affectionately named Ya, lay contentedly at Blake's feet, it was clear that Blake had a unique way with animals. He joked about his ability to charm any creature, hinting at his encounters with even the most formidable of foes, though he quickly coughed to cover the slip. Their evening continued with discussions of magical creatures, potions, and the many adventures that Hogwarts had to offer, all the while deepening the bond between the young wizard and the gentle giantess who had so much to share from her years amidst the magic and mystery of the Forbidden Forest. Coughing and barking broke the silence of the evening. "Woof! Woof! Woof! Ya! The dog suddenly stood up, barking at the window alertly. "Who's outside?" Hagrid, with a mix of curiosity and concern, rose to his feet and moved to open the door. "Oh, Cassandra, did you come with Blake?" Yes," Cassandra replied, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. "She was walking a bit slowly, so I arrived RST. Blake glanced at Cassandra, offering her a helping hand with a smile. "I see. Well, come in then." Hagrid welcomed them warmly. Cassandra's cheeks flushed a deeper shade of red as she accepted a large teacup from Hagrid, which seemed almost comically oversized in her hands. Blake couldn't help but chuckle at the sight, earning an eye roll from Cassandra in response. Their visit was brief. Hagrid reminded them of the impending curfew at the castle. Lingering too long would risk being caught by Filch for a nighttime escapade, which neither of them wanted. With a wave of goodbye to Hagrid, Blake and Cassandra left, unicorn horns still on Blake's mind. Blake had hoped to acquire unicorn horns from Hagrid, but learned that Hagrid had respectfully buried the deceased unicorns without removing their horns. Understanding the passage of time would diminish the horn's potency if not properly preserved, Blake wasn't disheartened. His plan had always been more ambitious, to earn the trust of living unicorns in the Forbidden Forest and, if possible, obtain their horns directly, as they could regrow much like human fingernails. Failing that, he considered using a Pokeball or simply purchasing them given their relatively affordable price on the market. As they walked back, Cassandra questioned Blake's intentions. "You really just wanted to ask Hagrid about unicorn horns?" "Yes, I'm planning to brew some elixir of blessings," Blake replied nonchalantly. "Elixir of blessings?" Cassandra was taken aback. "Isn't that something 6th graders start learning?" Blake smiled confidently. "Perhaps it's a bit advanced for you, but it's just right for me." Cassandra couldn't hide her frustration. Talent seemed to give him a free pass to do as he pleased. "Why are you even at Hogwarts if you're already so powerful?" she muttered, feeling somewhat diminished by his prowess. Blake's response was simple. "If I don't stay at Hogwarts, my old man won't let me go anywhere else." It was clear he referred to Dumbledore, whose decision to keep such a talented student close was understandable. As they neared the castle gates, Cassandra halted, sensing something amiss. "You didn't just go to Hagrid's for tea, did you? If I hadn't come with you, would you have ventured into the Forbidden Forest alone?" Blake nodded, unbothered by her realization. "Yes, that's right. After I escort you back, I plan to go there." Cassandra was shocked by his candidness. She had expected him to be more secretive about such intentions. "You don't need to worry about my safety. I've been in and out of there before," Blake assured her with a smile, his confidence unwavering. Compared to the myriad of forbidden plants he sought, a trip to the Forbidden Forest was merely another adventure for Blake. Cassandra was well aware of the Ask for Anything house, so there was no point in keeping it a secret from her. Blake had initially concealed this information because he hoped to surprise her and secure a treasure chest in the process. Lately, it had become increasingly difficult to obtain high-quality treasure chests, as everyone seemed to have grown accustomed to the extraordinary events around them, no longer reacting with the same intensity as before. For instance, when Blake had managed to raise a phoenix, the reaction was underwhelming. Little Wizard A exclaimed, "Wow, who managed that? It's incredible to have raised a phoenix." Little Wizard B responded, "It was Blake." Little Wizard A then dismissively said, "Oh, him. Well, that's expected. Let's just eat." The excitement quickly fizzled out, leaving Blake frustrated by the lack of emotional response and, consequently, the absence of a treasure chest. Acknowledging the need for a more cautious approach, Blake decided to venture into the Forbidden Forest unannounced, which led Cassandra to contribute a silver treasure chest, much to his satisfaction. "Let's head back to the Slytherin common room," Blake suggested, ready to leave. However, Cassandra, showing unexpected courage, expressed her desire to explore the Forbidden Forest. Blake, taken aback, teased her. "What are you, a Gryffindor spy in Slytherin? That's quite brave of you." Cassandra retorted, "Coming from a Hufflepuff, that's rich." Blake shook his head, explaining that it would be inconvenient to bring her along, since his mobility and speed would be significantly reduced. Cassandra, undeterred, insisted on going alone, prompting Blake to leave her behind and proceed to the Cloud Forest. Feeling abandoned and underestimated, Cassandra angrily followed Blake, who, upon receiving a golden treasure chest, turned to her with a smile, feigning innocence. "What's the matter?" he asked. "You just left me behind," Cassandra protested. Blake, with a pat on her shoulder, confidently said, "You claimed you could handle it, and I believe in you. Besides, the Forbidden Forest isn't dangerous, except for the eight-eyed giant spiders the size of carriages." Leaving Cassandra once again, Blake ventured deeper into the forest. Cassandra, despite her initial fear and frustration, was determined not to be outdone by Blake. Her resolve led her to follow him, despite the dangers that lay ahead. Upon catching up, Blake pointed out that she could have taken a safer path, Hagrid's path, which was generally less perilous. Cassandra, however, stubbornly refused to admit she was following him, insisting on her right to choose her own path. Their interaction highlighted a mix of rivalry and camaraderie, with Cassandra's determination to prove herself and Blake's challenging but ultimately supportive attitude. As they navigated the complexities of the Forbidden Forest, their adventure was just beginning, promising more challenges and perhaps more treasure chests to uncover. "You say you wouldn't bring me along? Well, I'll just follow you myself. Let's see what you can do about that." When Blake heard this, he couldn't help but think, "Is she trying to outsmart me?" A mischievous smile played at the corners of his mouth as he responded, "You have a point. Then, goodbye." With those words, Blake quickly disappeared behind a large tree. Fueled by determination and a hint of rivalry, Cassandra gritted her teeth and hurried after him. However, when she reached the other side of the tree, Blake was nowhere to be found. "Hey, come out," she called, her voice tinged with frustration. "Where did you go? Don't scare me like this." Cassandra tried to suppress the rising fear within her as she searched the area, but Blake was simply gone. Despite her usual stubbornness and competitive nature, Cassandra was, at heart, just a young girl. And now, she found herself alone in the Forbidden Forest after nightfall, surrounded by darkness and an eerie silence. The Forbidden Forest was notorious for its terrifying legends, and Blake's earlier mention of an eight-eyed giant spider, as large as a carriage, only fueled her imagination. The more she thought about it, the more frightened she became, her mind conjuring images of giant spiders lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce at any moment. As her fear escalated, Cassandra could no longer contain it. She turned around, intending to run back to the safety of the castle, but a chilling realization stopped her in her tracks. In her frantic search for Blake, and with the night growing ever darker, she had lost her way. Damn it all, she cursed, tears of frustration and fear welling up in her eyes. Don't panic, just stay calm, she whispered to herself, trying to quell the rising panic. With trembling hands, she took out her wand and held it firmly in her palm. Show me the way, she commanded in a shaky voice. Obediently, the wand began to turn in her hand, finally pointing north. Gathering her courage, Cassandra took a deep breath and started walking in the direction indicated by her wand, hoping it would lead her back to the safety and familiarity of Hogwarts Castle. Chapter 89: A Terrifying Night and an Unexpected Savior. Cassandra's heart pounded with fear as she hurried through the dense underbrush of the Forbidden Forest, desperate to escape its dark embrace. Her only thought was to get out as quickly as possible and then deal with the treacherous individual who had led her into this nightmare. In her panic, she failed to notice a critical mistake. She was following her wand's directional spell, which, much like a compass, pointed north. However, the castle lay not to the north of the Forbidden Forest, but in a completely different direction. It took her 5 agonizing minutes to realize her dire error. Trying to suppress the mounting fear, Cassandra attempted to recalibrate her direction, but her earlier wandering had disoriented her, and without the castle lights in sight, she was utterly lost in the late-night forest. Cassandra knew she had to calm down. Initially, finding the right direction seemed possible, but now, lost and directionless, her hope dwindled. Wandering aimlessly was a bad idea, likely worsening her situation, and staying put was even more dangerous. The Forbidden Forest was home to creatures that could terrify even the bravest souls, and as a first-year wizard with only a basic grasp of offensive spells, she doubted her ability to defend herself against such dark beings. Just as she was about to consult her watch and choose a new direction, the silence of the forest was shattered by a rustling sound, sending a shiver down her spine. The sound of something moving through the branches was terrifying in the unknown darkness. Cassandra raised her wand, its light casting eerie shadows as she nervously scanned her surroundings. The rustling grew louder, followed by an odd sound of hooves, as if a horse were approaching. But the idea of a horse in the Forbidden Forest seemed absurd. The sound of galloping circled her, then suddenly it charged straight towards her. Her heart leaped to her throat in fear. I'll kill you!" Cassandra shouted, unleashing the most powerful spell she knew. A bolt of lightning shot from her wand, only to be deflected, sending a shower of sawdust from a nearby tree. Her spell had failed, and the sound of hooves grew closer. In her moment of despair, the bushes parted, and a snow-white creature burst forth. Not a horse, Cassandra realized, noticing the long horn on its head, and atop the unicorn was a familiar figure, Blake. The sight of Blake riding the unicorn instantly calmed Cassandra's frantic heart. It was as if she had found a beacon of hope in the darkness. "Why did you attack me with a spell? I was almost killed by you," Blake exclaimed, his face showing traces of fear. Cassandra's fear turned to anger and frustration. Why didn't I kill you? Where did you go just now? Do you have any idea how scared I was?" Blake scratched his head, looking sheepish. "Didn't you say you could handle it on your own? Then why didn't you come with me when I asked?" Cassandra retorted, her anger palpable. Blake spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. "But you didn't ask me to." Their argument faded into the night, overshadowed by the relief of finding each other in the dark and dangerous forest. Despite the fear and misunderstandings, the unexpected encounter with the unicorn under the moonlit sky brought a sense of wonder and a glimmer of magic to their harrowing adventure. Cassandra was taken aback. "Yes, you didn't ask me to. If you had asked me to guide you through the Forbidden Forest, despite it being a bit inconvenient, I would have agreed because of our friendship," Blake began to clarify, trying to jog Cassandra's memory. Earlier, I mentioned it wasn't convenient for me to accompany you, and you insisted you didn't need my help. Then, I pointed out the dangers of going alone, but you were adamant about your ability to manage. As a good friend, I chose to trust your judgment at that moment and proceeded on my own. Wasn't that your intention? Cassandra stared at Blake, her expression a mix of confusion and realization. It dawned on her that she indeed hadn't asked for his company and had even stressed her independence. You. She struggled to find the words, her eyes brimming with tears. It was a rare sight. Cassandra had always been the strongest among her peers, never shedding a tear since she was 5. Yet here she was, crying over Blake's actions, which upon reflection seemed to stem from her own decisions. This realization only deepened her sense of injustice, leaving her at a loss for whom to blame. Blake, who had been playfully teasing Cassandra up to this point, hadn't anticipated her tears. "Ahem, perhaps I went too far," he admitted, dismounting the unicorn and crouching beside the distraught Cassandra. "Don't cry. Let me introduce you to a new friend," he offered, though Cassandra initially ignored him. He gestured, and the unicorn, Karina, approached them. "This is Karina, my new friend. Please don't cry. I want you to meet her." Cassandra, still sobbing, glanced up and saw the unicorn. The sight of the majestic creature with its curious gaze fixed on her momentarily made her forget her grievances. Unicorns were known for their calming presence, and Karina was no exception. "Karina, this is Cassandra, my friend. I'm afraid I've upset her. Could you help me make amends?" Blake asked the unicorn. Karina nuzzled Cassandra's shoulder gently and let out a soft whinny, which seemed to soothe Cassandra's tears. Encouraged, Cassandra reached out to stroke Karina's cheek. "I'm sorry for making you cry. How about we explore the Forbidden Forest tonight with Karina?" Blake proposed, extending his hand to help Cassandra up. "Is it really okay?" Cassandra hesitated, aware of the unicorn's sacredness. "Don't worry, Karina considers us friends," Blake reassured her. Still reluctant, Cassandra was surprised when Blake lifted her onto Karina's back. Flustered, she protested, but Blake swiftly mounted the unicorn behind her, securing her with a gentle hold around her waist. With a flick of his wand, Blake conjured a light to guide their path. "Let's go," he declared confidently. Karina surged forward, the sudden acceleration catching Cassandra off guard. As she struggled to find something to hold on to, Blake's arms tightened around her waist, stabilizing her. "Be careful, Karina is quite swift," he warned. As they ventured into the Forbidden Forest under the cover of night, the adventure promised to be unlike any other, filled with the magic and mystery that only such a place could offer. The night air was crisp and invigorating, a stark contrast to the warmth that flushed Cassandra's cheeks. She could feel the cool breeze against her face, yet it did little to alleviate the heat emanating from the person behind her, nor the firm grip of the hand encircling her waist. Abruptly, Blake's voice pierced the silence. "Stop!" he commanded. At his word, Karina halted, and Blake dismounted with ease before turning to Cassandra with an excited gleam in his eyes. "Come and see. What do you think I've found?" Cassandra glanced down, realizing the height from which she'd have to descend. The unicorn was indeed tall, and she hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Without waiting for her to decide, Blake approached, lifted her effortlessly, and set her down beside him, leaving Cassandra momentarily at a loss for words. "Look, there's a holly tree here," Blake exclaimed, his enthusiasm undiminished by Cassandra's silence. Cassandra, still recovering from the unexpected dismount, questioned, "What's so special about a holly tree?" "Aha, take a closer look. What do you think those little creatures on the tree are?" Blake urged, casting an illumination spell to better reveal the tree's inhabitants. Following his lead, Cassandra peered closer and spotted several small beings camouflaged among the branches and leaves. They were nearly indistinguishable from their surroundings, save for their large, black eyes that stood out against the greenery. "Bowtruckles?" she gasped in surprise. "Exactly. I'm impressed you know about the Professor M," Blake said, his excitement palpable. He rummaged through his pockets and produced a small cloth bag. "I've read about them in a book before," Cassandra admitted, curiosity piqued. "What are you looking for?" she inquired as Blake continued his search. "Ah, here it is. Country bumpkins. I remembered to bring some," Blake announced triumphantly. Any tree guarded by a bowtruckle can be used to make a magic wand. We just need to offer them some country bumpkins or fairy eggs to pacify them. Then, we can take the opportunity to collect some of the wood. As he explained, Blake poured the contents of the cloth bag into his hand and held it aloft. The sight of the country bumpkins stirred the initially shy bowtruckles into action. One by one, they began to descend from their perches, each taking a turn to feast on the offered treats. "Don't be nervous, Cassandra. Don't be afraid," Blake whispered, his voice calm and reassuring. Any sudden or violent movement might scare them away, or worse, provoke them into using their long fingers to teach us a lesson. Cassandra held her breath, not daring to make a sound for fear of disturbing the delicate creatures. She watched as the bowtruckles, initially timid, grew bolder with each bite, eventually forming an orderly line to partake in the feast. Soon, more than half of the country bumpkins had vanished. When the last bowtruckle finished its meal, a rustling sound emanated from the tree. 2 bowtruckles descended, carrying a branch about 50 centimeters long and as thick as an arm, which they presented to Blake. "Thank you," he said with a smile, accepting the holly wood branch, a valuable material for wand making. As Blake turned to leave, an 8-inch tall bowtruckle climbed up his sleeve and gestured, seemingly asking to accompany him. Recalling the information from the book, Blake understood that if he offered enough country bumpkins, he could gain their favor. Fortunate enough, one of the bowtruckles seemed eager to join him. "Okay, then you can come with me," Blake agreed, delighted by the prospect. Bowtruckles were known for their ability to sneak in and pick locks, making them invaluable companions for any lock they might encounter that couldn't be opened by magic. Cassandra watched in amazement, aware of the stringent conditions required to tame a bowtruckle. She hadn't expected that Blake's brief feeding session would result in one wanting to follow him. It made her wonder if there was a particular affinity between Hufflepuffs and magical creatures, a thought that left her both surprised and envious. The bowtruckles inhabiting the tree descended in unison, converging onto Blake with surprising agility. Cassandra, witnessing this, let out a shriek of terror. In a swift motion, she drew her wand, her mind racing with thoughts of an imminent attack on Blake. However, Blake gestured for her to halt, his voice calm amidst the chaos. Don't worry. They actually all want to come with me." Cassandra, wand still in hand, stared at Blake, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. "They all want to follow you?" She glanced at the multitude of bowtruckles clinging to him, her mind struggling to grasp the situation. It was rare enough for someone to attract a single bowtruckle, considered a stroke of immense luck. But for Blake to have the entire group from this tree wanting to accompany him was beyond extraordinary. "Do you all truly wish to join me?" Blake inquired, addressing the bowtruckles with a gentle tone. He then turned his attention to the holly tree they had abandoned. "And what about this tree?" After a moment of contemplation, he nodded to himself. "All right, I'll figure something out." Allowing the bowtruckles to settle on him, Blake thoughtfully scratched his chin before drawing his own wand. With a graceful motion, he cast a spell, transforming the holly tree into a sentient tree man, complete with a nose and eyes. The tree man, now animate, stood solemnly before Blake, a testament to his mastery over transfiguration. "Transfiguration," Cassandra observed, her feelings a complex web of admiration and envy. Blake's proficiency in the art of transfiguration had evidently reached an impressive level. Damn it, the gap between us is widening, and here I was, hoping to challenge him as my rival. But now, with another wave of his wand, Blake directed the tree man to levitate. Before their eyes, the figure reshaped itself back into the grand form of a holly tree, suspended in midair. This display of skill not only showcased Blake's exceptional control and creativity with magic, but also his deep connection and understanding of the magical creatures and elements he interacted with. Chapter 90. Before I even have time to be afraid, you're gone again? The holly tree hovered in midair, a testament to Blake's mastery over transfiguration. With a flick of his wand, a large blue stone beside him morphed into an enormous flower pot. Cassandra watched, utterly bewildered by Blake's spellcasting prowess. "Who am I? Where am I? What have I just witnessed?" she thought to herself, incredulity lacing her thoughts. "Did I actually consider challenging him to a duel? I must be out of my mind. Her confidence had plummeted, especially since her treasure chest of magical artifacts had reached its limit for the day, and the system only issued a reminder once. Unaware of the profound impact his actions had on Cassandra, Blake continued with his task, seamlessly transitioning from one spell to the next. He gently guided the holly tree into the newly formed flower pot. Then, with another wave of his wand, the soil from the ground levitated and filled the pot, securing the tree in its new home. "Are you planting a tree?" Cassandra asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. "But even if it's in a flower pot, how will you take it with you?" Blake smiled, a hint of pride in his voice. "As long as it's planted in a flower pot, I can take it anywhere." From the pocket of his school uniform, which he had transfigured from his levitation cloak, he retrieved his prized plant collection bag. Most of his plants were stored in the room of requirement, making the bag spacious enough for even the largest specimens. With a flourish, he opened the bag and, with a whoosh, placed the potted holly inside. Cassandra watched in amazement as Blake effortlessly stored such a large tree, feeling a mix of awe and numbness. After stowing his wand away and wiping the sweat from his brow, Blake turned his attention to the bowtruckles. "Now into my pocket you go. I'll release you when we return tonight." He opened the large pocket of his levitation cloak, and the bowtruckles eagerly hopped in. The remaining woodcutters were also deposited into the pocket, their excited chirps filling the air. Once everything was secured, Blake glanced at Cassandra, noticing her dazed expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, his smile warm. "Are you still frightened? The only downside to the Forbidden Forest is its perpetual gloom. Let's move on to our next destination." Cassandra, still processing the events, mounted the unicorn behind Blake. "Do you do this every night?" she inquired. Blake shook his head. "Of course not. Tonight is an exception." He explained that on any other night he would simply transform and fly directly to his destination. However, with Cassandra accompanying him, they had to travel on foot, or, more accurately, by unicorn. He had chosen a gentle female unicorn as their mount, ensuring Cassandra's safety on the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest, where the creatures were less likely to pose a threat. This area was often used by the Care of Magical Creatures professor for class, thanks to its relative safety. Cassandra pondered for a moment before asking, "And if it weren't a special situation, how would you navigate the Forbidden Forest?" Blake was candid in his response. "If it's not a special case, I usually fly straight to my destination and leave as soon as my task is completed." He then shifted the conversation towards their upcoming journey. "The path ahead may be more perilous than what we've encountered so far. It won't be as comfortable," he warned. To ensure Cassandra's safety, Blake presented her with a bracelet emitting a faint blue light, which automatically clasped around her wrist upon contact. "This is an alchemical creation of mine," he explained. "It can cast a protective shield and provide other beneficial effects to help us on our journey." Cassandra gazed at the exquisite bracelet on her wrist, a gift from Blake that could change its shape according to her preferences. A wave of emotion rippled through her heart. Blake, however, was more focused on the journey ahead. Their path to the waiting site skirted the edge of the Acromantula territory. While the fringes were not as densely populated with the giant spiders as the heart of their domain, there were still many smaller Acromantulas lurking. For Blake and Karina the unicorn, these creatures posed no real threat. However, for Cassandra's safety, Blake had given her the magical bracelet as a precaution. "What dangers should we expect?" Cassandra inquired, her voice tinged with apprehension. "We might encounter a few spiders," Blake replied nonchalantly. Cassandra's body tensed at the mention of spiders. "How small are we talking?" "Well, they're definitely not as big as a carriage," Blake assured her, trying to downplay their size. Cassandra's mind raced, imagining spiders as large as water tanks. "You call those little?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Blake then shared their next destination, hinting at something or someone powerful that had caught his interest. "We're going to see a big guy, just to take a look and gauge how fierce it is." His eyes sparkled with excitement at the prospect of this reconnaissance mission, which could potentially lead to taming the creature with a pokeball in the future. As they ventured deeper into Acromantula territory, the trees thinned, and the air became thick with the sight of pale spider webs. Cassandra, overwhelmed by fear, refused to look up, dreading what might be ensnared within those webs. Suddenly, the forest came alive with the sound of rustling, sending chills down Cassandra's spine. Karina, sensing the danger, let out a nervous neigh. Blake, ever the protector, reassured her and prepared his custom wand for action. Cassandra, gripped by fear, instinctively clutched Blake's hand for comfort. She watched in awe as Blake cast a spell, summoning a dazzling fire that illuminated their path. The flames engulfed the smaller spiders, which had emerged from the shadows, their sizes comparable to wine barrels, eager to pounce on their prey. Despite using a basic fire spell, Blake's mastery, enhanced by his Gandalf template, turned it into a formidable weapon, incinerating the spiders with terrifying efficiency. Their path was suddenly blocked by an acromantula as large as a wagon, a sight that took both Cassandra and Blake by surprise. Without hesitation, Blake cast a thunderbolt explosion spell, sending a fiery red fireball hurtling towards the giant spider. The impact was catastrophic, obliterating 2/3 of the acromantula's body and reducing it to a heap of charred flesh. Cassandra stared in disbelief at the remains of the once formidable predator, marveling at the power of Blake's spell. What a terrible spell. I remember that the thunderbolt explosion is not that powerful, she murmured, as they continued their journey, leaving the carcass and its still oozing venom behind. Blake felt a twinge of regret as he considered the value of a pint of unicorn blood, worth hundreds of galleons. Yet, with Karina, the unicorn's swift pace, and his own exceptional talent in fire magic, they had navigated through the acromantula's territory without a scratch, decimating the spider army in their wake. Blake had unleashed a barrage of destructive spells, now basking in a sense of liberation. Setting fire is indeed the best way to deal with spiders, he mused, exhilarated by the power of his flame magic. No wonder there's a saying that art is explosions. Okay, from now on, we're out of danger, Blake announced, stowing his wand away. Cassandra, still reeling from the spectacle, asked in disbelief, Are you really Muggle-born? How are you so powerful? You've only been back in the wizarding world for a few months. The scene they had just witnessed had left her astounded. Her most potent weather spell paled in comparison to the might Blake had displayed. A single thunderbolt explosion from him had obliterated a massive acromantula, a feat that seemed beyond comprehension. Cassandra knew Blake had grown up in an orphanage, only introduced to the wizarding world 2 months prior by Dumbledore. Yet, in such a short span, his prowess was undeniable. Despite her lifelong exposure to magic, she felt overshadowed by Blake's rapid advancement. Feeling a mix of admiration and envy, Cassandra listened as Blake explained, Well, I have a pretty good memory, so I can remember almost everything I read. That's how I quickly got a handle on herbalism, potion making, and the like. As for spells, I didn't even know I was a wizard until recently. I thought my abilities were just some sort of superpower, so I've been practicing on my own since I was a child, without a wand or knowledge of spells. Cassandra was floored. No wand, no spells, just self-guided exploration? And yet, Blake had managed to harness his magical abilities with such casual proficiency. It seemed Blake was not just talented, he was a prodigy, blessed by fate itself. Ah, we're almost there! Blake's voice snapped Cassandra out of her reverie. The salty scent of the sea breeze filled the air, signaling their arrival at the beach on the other side of the forbidden forest. Karina, the unicorn, halted, her excitement palpable as she gazed at the ocean for the first time. Blake assisted Cassandra in dismounting from Karina. Where is the big guy you mentioned? Cassandra inquired, scanning the surroundings. The sparse trees gave way to a clearer view under the moonlight, revealing a large, ominous hole in a rock at the beach's edge, its depths unknown. If I'm not mistaken, that big guy is inside there, Blake pointed out. Before Cassandra could respond, a series of loud noises from the direction of the forbidden forest caught their attention. Karina neighed nervously, and Blake, sensing potential danger, drew his custom wand once more. The ground trembled as a massive black shadow emerged from the forest. It stinks. I knew it was you, Blake muttered, recognizing the creature. Cassandra, alarmed by the sight, asked, What is that? Oh, nothing. Just a mountain troll, Blake replied nonchalantly. Cassandra's fear escalated. What? A troll! Oh my God, let's go! Panic set in as she realized the magnitude of the threat they faced. The creature they encountered turned out to be a mountain troll, its skin rough and flesh thick. I contemplated a swift departure, knowing well that ordinary spells could barely scratch its formidable defenses. However, Blake had no intention of fleeing. I had actually hoped to draw that behemoth out for a closer look. Alas, I hadn't yet devised a plan, he admitted. But your arrival is serendipitous. The mountain troll, noticing the two young wizards, fixed its dim gaze upon them. After a moment's pause, it brandished its massive club and charged with a burst of excitement. "Rise," commanded Blake, flourishing his wand. The troll's advance halted abruptly, its attention drawn to its right hand, or, more precisely, to the absence of the club it once held. "Go down!" Blake's voice rang out again. With a resounding thud, the club, now suspended in the air, crashed down upon the troll's thick skull. The troll's eyes slowly crossed as it swayed, and then, with a thunderous boom, it collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Blake strode confidently towards the fallen giant, while Cassandra looked on in disbelief. She rubbed her eyes vigorously, as if questioning the reality before her. Did I see that correctly? Such a massive creature, subdued in mere seconds. The transformation of the scene from a potentially perilous encounter to a swift victory showcased not only Blake's quick thinking, but also his adeptness with magic. The mountain troll, a creature known for its formidable physical prowess, was rendered harmless with a clever use of levitation and timing. This encounter, though brief, highlighted the ingenuity and resourcefulness often required in the face of danger within the magical world. Chapter 91: The King of Horned Camels. Cassandra's Astonishment. Blake held his nose as he approached the unconscious mountain giant, grimacing at the foul odor emanating from it. This thing reeks as if it just emerged from a sewer, he thought to himself. His first concern was to determine whether this creature could be classified as a fantastic beast. Given its humanoid appearance, it was a gray area. Many humanoid creatures are considered humans rather than magical beasts, such as giants. Thus, Blake was uncertain if he could tame the mountain troll in the same way he might tame other creatures. To ensure Cassandra couldn't witness his attempt, Blake positioned himself to block her view. However, he soon realized he was overly cautious. The stench of the mountain troll was so overpowering that Cassandra had already distanced herself as far as possible, paying no attention to Blake's actions. Turning his back to Cassandra, Blake allowed his druid magic to flow freely, directing it towards the mountain giant's small, coconut-like head. He braced himself, expecting the process to consume a significant amount of his druid mana. To his surprise, the task required only a minimal amount, and soon enough, an additional entry for a mountain troll appeared on Blake's Fantastic Beasts panel. This indicated that the creature was now under his control. This was easier than expected, Blake mused, reflecting on how many wizards train mountain trolls as guards for various locations. Given his archdruid abilities, it shouldn't have been surprising that he could tame the creature with such ease. With a sense of accomplishment, Blake commanded the now subdued mountain troll. Unlike those tamed by other wizards, which could inadvertently harm allies, Blake's control ensured the creature would remain docile and not lash out unpredictably. Stepping back, Blake pointed his wand at the large bump on the troll's head and uttered, "Back to the original." Moments later, the mountain giant stirred to life, sitting up and looking around with surprisingly wise eyes. Upon noticing Blake, it seemed to recognize him as its master. Cassandra, witnessing the scene, was utterly shocked. "The troll has woken up. What's happening here?" She stammered, her worry resurfacing as the troll quickly obeyed Blake's commands. Blake, still holding his nose, gestured for Cassandra to stay back as he instructed the mountain giant to stand. The creature, though confused about why it should listen to Blake, decided not to overthink it and complied, grabbing a large stick polished by a nearby tree. "Go to the cave entrance and challenge me," Blake ordered, to which the troll responded with a puzzled, "Provocation? What do you mean by provocation?" Blake sighed, momentarily forgetting the creature's limited intellect. Simplifying his command, he said, "Go there, call out." Obediently, the mountain troll dragged its club towards the cave entrance, leaving Blake to conjure a breeze with his wand to dissipate the lingering stench. Cassandra, still in disbelief, asked, You tamed it? A mountain troll? That's right, Blake confirmed, freshening the air around them with a cleansing charm. He explained his unique talent for attracting and taming fantastic beasts, a skill that seemed as natural to him as breathing and one that could not be taught or learned by others. As they spoke, the unicorn Karina approached, nuzzling Blake affectionately. His affinity for magical creatures was indeed a rare gift, akin to that of a born transformation magus, utilizing an instinct as natural and effortless as any innate ability. Eating and drinking might seem like instinctive skills to most, but in the wizarding world, possessing a unique magical talent is far from unusual. For wizards like Dumbledore, the revelation that Blake was a man-made life form only made his awakening of special abilities more plausible. This identity provided Blake with a convenient excuse for his extraordinary actions, eliminating the need for explanations about his nature. Cassandra observed the unicorn's affinity for Blake with awe. Unicorns, known for their reluctance to let wizards mount them, and a group of bowtruckles, which seemed eager to follow him, were clear indicators of Blake's exceptional talent. He had the rare ability to attract and tame various magical creatures. Understanding this, Cassandra realized why Blake was so drawn to the Forbidden Forest. With his unique gift, it was as welcoming to him as a home. She admitted to herself that, were she in his shoes, she would frequent the forest as well. Meanwhile, a mountain troll had arrived at the entrance of a cave, brandishing its club and emitting a terrible cry that resembled the sound of a broken drum being beaten frantically. The noise was unbearable even for Blake and Cassandra, who stood at a distance. The creature that emerged from the cave in response to the troll's call was a sight to behold. It resembled a leopard with a raised back, covered in purple scales, with two sharp golden horns atop its head, similar to a saber-toothed tiger, but with numerous slippery tentacles around its mouth. What kind of creature is this? Cassandra inquired, her extensive family background notwithstanding. It's a purple-horned beast, though most refer to it as a horned camel, Blake explained. It's classified as a XXXXX level creature, similar to the mountain troll, but this one is exceptional. It's likely the strongest horned camel living on the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest. Only a true leader among its kind could claim such a cave for itself. Blake admired the horned camel, which was significantly larger than its peers, with satisfaction. The mountain troll, upon seeing the horned camel, displayed a naive smile, unaware of the old enmity between their species. Mountain trolls often attempted to tame horned camels, usually resulting in the trolls being severely beaten. The horned camel, provoked by the mountain troll's display of might, charged with incredible speed and collided with the troll, sending it flying through the air before it crashed into the sand, unconscious. The horned camel then returned to its cave with a disdainful snort. Blake's eyes sparkled with admiration for the horned camel's prowess. He mused about the potential of training it further, likening it to empowering a tiger with wings. Blake and Cassandra then rode the unicorn to the beach, not far from the mountains. Upon dismounting, Blake inspected the mountain troll, which, though severely injured and barely alive, had survived the encounter. This incident highlighted the horned camel's ferocity. With his wand in hand, Blake cast a powerful healing spell, mending the troll's injuries and reviving it. He then allowed the creature to return to the Forbidden Forest, demonstrating a blend of strength and mercy. Blake decided it was best not to linger any longer, fearing the possibility of provoking the horned camel once more. Without the presence of Blake to intervene, the creature would likely face a grim fate. Okay, let's head back, Blake announced, returning to where Cassandra waited. Together, they mounted the unicorn, preparing to depart. Are we going to pass through the territory of the Acromantula again? Cassandra inquired, her voice tinged with apprehension. Blake pondered for a moment, scratching his chin thoughtfully. Actually, we could take a detour. It's a bit longer, but it would allow us to explore a few more habitats of magical creatures tonight. However, it means we might return to the castle late. Cassandra, still shaken from their earlier encounter, quickly dismissed her concerns. It's okay to be late. I just really would rather not go through those spiders' territory again, she admitted. Blake nodded in understanding. All right then, Just make sure you don't fall asleep in tomorrow's transfiguration class, he joked. With a neigh, Karina the unicorn surged forward. It was clear that unicorns, even by the standards of horses, were exceptional creatures, possessing a grace and speed unmatched by ordinary steeds. Yet few had the privilege to ride one as Blake did. Their return journey was markedly safer than their venture out. Along the way, they encountered the habitat of the ball-stalking bird. Blake paused to collect several of its feathers. Despite the bird's inability to fly, its ability to teleport made its feathers highly valuable. Next, they visited the habitat of the soundless bird, a creature of stunning beauty that remained silent until its final moments. When it did vocalize, it would release all the sounds it had absorbed throughout its life, starting with the most recent. Blake collected some of its feathers as well, noting their usefulness in concocting veritasirum and memory potions. Seeing Cassandra's fascination with the bird, Blake managed to tame one and gifted it to her. By the time they returned to the edge of the forbidden forest, it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning. After dismounting Karina, Blake whispered a few words of gratitude to the unicorn, who then trotted away contentedly. Cassandra observed the scene in silence, her sense of wonderment growing. The night's adventures had introduced her to a world far beyond the ordinary, filled with beauty, danger, and the thrill of the unknown. It seems that the feeling of adventure is also quite exhilarating, she mused. 2 days later, Blake encountered an old house elf in his dormitory. Despite being clad in a Hogwarts tea towel, Blake immediately recognized that this elf was not one of Hogwarts' own. The elf introduced himself as Gucci, the father of Baker, and presented Blake with a suitcase of materials, expressing joy and respect in his eyes. "Thank you, Gucci," Blake responded, genuinely appreciative of the elf's efforts. Gucci's reaction was one of sheer ecstasy. "Oh, the little master is so handsome, so elegant, and so humble to thank Gucci?" he exclaimed, overwhelmed with emotion. Suddenly, Blake received a notification. Congratulations to the host for receiving a silver treasure chest. This unexpected reward surprised Blake. While many house elves at Hogwarts had shown appreciation for his humility, none had ever triggered such a reward. This encounter with Gucci, an elderly house elf, not only provided Blake with valuable materials, but also a unique treasure chest, highlighting the exceptional strength and character of Gucci. It could only be said that he truly lived up to being Grindelwald's most trusted house elf. It's a testament to the fact that every race has the potential to produce remarkable individuals. Blake pondered over Gucci's exceptional abilities, considering the possibility of studying the underlying reasons for his strength. If such factors could be harnessed and applied to other house elves, the idea of training a formidable army of house elves didn't seem too far-fetched. Then, hiss. No, this isn't right. Blake suddenly snapped out of his reverie, alarmed by the direction of his thoughts. His mind had veered into a dangerously ambitious territory. Why had the idea of training an army of house elves even crossed his mind? He was supposed to be one of the good guys. Oh, the young master's thoughts mirror those of the old master in his youth. Gucci exclaimed, clearly astonished. Blake was taken aback by Gucci's observation. The comparison made him reflect on his intentions and the ethical implications of his fleeting ambition. It was a moment of self-awareness, realizing the thin line between ambition and overreach, especially when it involved sentient beings like house elves. His momentary lapse into a grandiose scheme was a stark reminder of the responsibilities that came with power and the importance of wielding it wisely. Chapter 92. Nicholas Flamel's Astonishment. This child's talent surpasses mine by leaps and bounds. The morning sun bathed the room in a warm glow as it streamed through the window. Perched outside was a magnificent fiery red bird, pecking at the glass with a rhythmic tuck-tuck-tuck. It wasn't long before there was a stir inside the house. An elderly man, clad in pajamas and moving with a slight shuffle, approached the window. His face lit up with joy at the sight of the bird. "Oh, dear Fox, I've told you before there's no need to knock," he chuckled as he opened the window, allowing the bird to glide in gracefully. Fox, the bird, deposited 2 letters on the windowsill before accepting the small fish the old man offered from a nearby box. The fish disappeared in a single gulp, leaving a look of sheer bliss in Fox's eyes. However, Fawkes didn't immediately take off. Instead, he cocked his head, eyeing the old man as if waiting for him to read the letters and possibly carry a response back. "All right, I'll read them now," the old man said, understanding Fawkes's silent urging. He caressed Fawkes's splendid feathers affectionately before turning his attention to the envelopes. One bore unfamiliar handwriting, while the other was encased in a familiar cursive script, circled elegantly. He picked up the latter and settled onto the sofa, his curiosity piqued. As he read through the letter, his expression shifted from intrigue to disbelief. The letter was from Dumbledore, introducing a young individual named Blake. Dumbledore shared that after reading his manuscript, Blake had come up with some novel ideas and sought his advice, questioning the validity of his own thoughts. Dumbledore, despite being a master alchemist, admitted to struggling with understanding Blake's concepts, a revelation that left Nicholas Flamel, for it was he, both surprised and somewhat embarrassed. Setting aside Dumbledore's letter, Nicholas turned to Blake's letter, eager to see if the claims were true. In the world of alchemy, Nicholas Flamel was a legend, his knowledge vast from centuries of study. Opening the envelope, he discovered an exquisitely crafted bracelet. "Extraordinary," he murmured, examining the piece. Despite noting minor flaws in its alchemical process, he was impressed by its quality, a rarity in modern times. It was clear to him that this was not Dumbledore's work, but rather that of a new, possibly unheralded, alchemist. With the bracelet set aside, Nicholas unfolded Blake's letter. It was concise, a mark of respect to a fellow master, outlining a series of innovative ideas that had occurred to Blake while studying Nicholas's manuscript. Time seemed to stand still as Nicholas absorbed the contents of the letter, his initial skepticism giving way to sheer astonishment. Could it truly be that this young mind had conceived such revolutionary ideas without any guidance? It was inconceivable that Dumbledore, with no significant background in this specific field of alchemy, could have contributed. Nicholas knew Dumbledore well enough to trust in his integrity. The realization dawned on Nicholas Flamel that he was witnessing the emergence of a genuine prodigy. The ideas laid out in Blake's letter were not just novel, they were groundbreaking. For a moment, Nicholas was lost in thought, overwhelmed by the potential of what he had just read. This was not merely talent, it was genius of the highest order, challenging everything he thought he knew about the limits of alchemical knowledge. An elderly woman, also clad in loose pajamas, slowly emerged from the room. "Nicole, what's going on? It's been years since I've seen you so lost in thought," she inquired. "Ah, Perenelle." Nicole Flamel sighed, his gaze returning to the letter in his hands. "It's because I've discovered a genius, a truly unparalleled genius." He was mesmerized by the letter's content. "This child has managed to grasp new concepts in just half a month, concepts that took me years to understand, and not just superficially, but with a deep, comprehensive understanding. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to innovate in the way he has. Even I, in my youth, overlooked such novel ideas." And then there's the bracelet mentioned at the end of the letter. "This is the first time I've attempted to create a bracelet using alchemy," the letter read. "Below are the blueprint and materials. I hope you can offer me some advice." Nicole Flamel let out another sigh. The craftsmanship of the bracelet, comparable to that of a master alchemist, was astonishingly the work of this child, and on his first attempt, no less. And the blueprint. It was exquisitely designed. If this was indeed the child's first attempt at alchemy and at designing a blueprint, then it was a remarkable feat. Unbeknownst to Nicole, the blueprint was actually produced by a system, thus considered to be the child's own design. Nicole believed it to be the child's work, a belief reinforced by Dumbledore's account of the child acquiring an ice phoenix. The bracelet's main material, the feather of an ice phoenix, was a choice only the child could have made, given that ice phoenixes had never been seen before in the world. Isn't it wonderful to encounter a genius? And for you, Nicole, to personally praise a genius, he must be truly exceptional, Perenelle Flamel, Nicole's wife, remarked. She knew her husband well, including his pride. The last person Nicole had shown such favor towards was Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, now hailed as the greatest wizard of the century. Yet, Nicole's reaction to this new prodigy seemed even more profound than his initial impression of young Dumbledore, suggesting this new genius possessed even greater talent. However, Nicole's expression was not one of pure joy. It's indeed a cause for happiness, but I'm also incredulous. Did you know that this child was brought from the Muggle world by Albus just 2 months ago? He's been exposed to alchemy for less than 3 months, yet I feel his achievements have already surpassed mine at the age of 30. Perenelle looked at her husband in astonishment, wondering if age had muddled his judgment. To suggest that a child, within 3 months, had exceeded the accomplishments of Nicole Flamel at 30 was unthinkable. After all, Nicole's exceptional talent had led him to create the Philosopher's Stone, extending his life far beyond its natural span. If you're so puzzled, why not ask Albus directly? Perenelle suggested. You always have a point, Perenelle. But could you stay a bit longer? Nicole stood up abruptly, not bothering to write back. Instead, he retrieved a book from a cabinet. Are you planning to use this to contact Albus? Yes. I can't wait any longer. I have questions that need to be asked in person. Even with a phoenix to deliver letters, it's too slow for me now, Nicole explained as he opened the book. Each page of the book contained a portrait, a magical means of communication, far quicker than any letter. Nicholas Flamel turned to the page featuring Dumbledore in the magical communication book. Upon seeing Nicholas, a flicker of surprise crossed Dumbledore's eyes. Nicholas addressed the portrait directly. I need to see Albus now. Dumbledore's portrait in the book nodded before fading away, only to reappear shortly after, this time not as a mere portrait, but as a living presence in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts. Dumbledore, holding a thick tome, faced Nicholas's image in the book with a wry smile. Nicholas, it's been ages since you've used this method to contact me. This communication book, a relic from the time when Grindelwald terrorized Europe, was used by those in secret resistance against him. Since Grindelwald's imprisonment in Nurmengard, the book had lain dormant. Dumbledore realized that Nicholas's sudden use of it must signify something of great importance. What's so urgent that you couldn't wait for Fawkes to deliver your message? Dumbledore asked, his expression turning grave as he braced for potentially world-shattering news. Nicholas, however, quickly eased Dumbledore's concern. It's not as dire as you both think. I wanted to discuss the young man, Blake, with you. Dumbledore's tension dissipated. Ah, if it's about Blake, then the matter might not be as catastrophic as I feared. He recalled sending a letter to Nicholas a few days prior, but knew well the challenges of reaching the alchemist. Nicholas's penchant for seclusion and the magical concealment of his whereabouts made him difficult to locate, even for Dumbledore's phoenix, Fawkes. Is this about Blake's letter? Dumbledore inquired, wondering if Blake had penned something offensive or alarming. You underestimate me, Albus. Would I really resort to this method over a few harsh words? Nicholas chided gently. Dumbledore apologized, realizing his mistake stemmed from his deep concern for Blake. He is indeed very important to me, Dumbledore admitted, eager to understand Nicholas's perspective. After a brief pause, Nicholas broached the subject of Blake's potential in alchemy. Dumbledore praised Blake's aptitude and quick learning, admitting that even in his youth, he couldn't match Blake's pace. Nicholas, with a hint of amusement and pride, declared, That boy is a genius, Albus, a true genius, and one who surpasses me by 100-fold. Dumbledore was taken aback by Nicholas's admission. To hear such high praise from Nicholas Flamel himself was extraordinary. The acknowledgement that Blake's talent in alchemy exceeded even that of Flamel, a renowned master of the art, was astounding. How can that be? Dumbledore exclaimed, struggling to grasp the magnitude of Nicholas's statement. Nicholas reminded Dumbledore of their previous conversation about Blake's recent introduction to alchemy and his rapid progress. It was clear that Blake's natural talent and potential were beyond what either of them had initially imagined. Dumbledore's expression remained one of shock, a testament to the revelation he had just encountered. 2 months ago, I introduced him to some alchemy texts, Nicholas Flamel sighed, the weight of his words hanging in the air. So, Albus, he has been immersed in the world of alchemy for less than 3 months. The astonishment in his voice was palpable as he continued, yet his accomplishments now surpassed those I had achieved by the age of 30. And to think, by that time, I had dedicated 15 years of my life to the study of alchemy. He paused, a mixture of incredulity and admiration coloring his tone. Do you suppose his talent far exceeds my own? Meanwhile, at Hogwarts, in the midst of a defense against the dark arts class, Blake found himself equally astounded. Before him, within the confines of the system's space, two supreme treasure chests had materialized out of nowhere. It appears that Nick Flamel has received my letter, he mused, a sense of wonder and anticipation washing over him. The implications of these developments were profound. Here was a student, Blake, whose prowess in alchemy had caught the attention of none other than Nicholas Flamel, a legend in his own right. And there, in the hallowed halls of Hogwarts, Dumbledore and Flamel pondered the potential of a talent that seemed to defy the very limits they had come to accept. The unfolding events promised to challenge their understanding of magic and mastery, setting the stage for a journey that would unravel in the most unexpected of ways. Chapter 93. The Innocence of Complexity. So this child is essentially a creation born from the fusion of wizarding alchemy and Muggle science? Nico Flamel pondered aloud after Dumbledore shared the astonishing news. Silence enveloped him as he grappled with the concept. As an esteemed alchemist who had lived for over 6 centuries, Flamel had indeed entertained the notion of using alchemy to create life. However, he ultimately abandoned this daunting idea, deeming it unethical and a violation of natural laws. In his expertise, crafting a human form through alchemy was feasible, yet the true challenge lay in the essence of life itself. Such a creation, he feared, would lack a soul, rendering it nothing more than a sophisticated mannequin. Wizards, aware of their own souls and the existence of ghosts within Hogwarts, would understand this distinction. However, Dumbledore's revelation that Grindelwald had succeeded in this endeavor decades ago took Flamel by surprise. The experiment, long thought to have failed, had indeed yielded a living being with a soul, Blake. Dumbledore, are you certain this child is free from corruption? Flamel inquired with gravity, addressing Dumbledore formally. Dumbledore responded with confidence. He's a good boy. I vouch for him and promise to guide him away from any path that might lead him astray. Flamel, reassured by Dumbledore's commitment, eventually conceded, acknowledging the unpredictable nature of alchemy. All right, Albus, inform the boy that he has my approval. The manuscript I sent is my gift to him, and he is welcome to explore my library. I'll have Fawkes deliver my letter to him, and should he seek knowledge, he can reach me directly via Phoenix. Meanwhile, Blake found himself under the tutelage of Quirrell, who was possessed by Voldemort, in a defense against the dark arts class. Despite the bizarre circumstances, Voldemort, through Quirrell, was imparting genuine combat techniques, much to Blake's bewilderment. It seemed as though Voldemort was preparing him for something greater, or perhaps compensating for his own unfulfilled desires to teach the subject. After the class, the students, now buzzing with excitement and newfound respect, bid Professor Quirrell a polite farewell, a stark contrast to their demeanor just weeks prior. This chapter delves into the ethical boundaries of magical innovation, the unexpected mentorship of an adversary, and the complexities hidden within seemingly straightforward intentions. Through the interactions between Dumbledore, Flamel, and Blake, it explores themes of trust, redemption, and the pursuit of knowledge, all while hinting at the deeper machinations at play within the wizarding world. The transformation of Professor Quirrell from his former self was notable, with many attributing the change to an incident involving Blake's illuminating spell. This event, seen by some as a fortunate accident, seemingly cured Quirrell of his previous ailments, allowing him to teach more effectively. While this improvement was welcomed by most, Blake felt a sense of unease, uncertain of Quirrell's true intentions. As Blake and Hermione prepared to leave the classroom, Quirrell's voice halted Blake's departure. Hermione, unaware of the significance, bid Blake farewell and left, considering such requests from Quirrell to be routine. After all, it was well known that Blake was Quirrell's favored student, a fact that always sent a shiver down Blake's spine. He wished his emotional turmoil could somehow unlock a treasure chest of rewards. Attempting to mask his apprehension, Blake faced Quirrell with feigned admiration and asked, "Professor, what do you need me to do?" Quirrell inquired if Blake was aware of the school clubs, to which Blake admitted his limited knowledge. Despite the numerous student societies at Hogwarts, they were seldom mentioned in the original narrative, leaving Blake somewhat in the dark. Quirrell suggested Blake join a club to further develop his talents, praising his exceptional abilities. He then revealed his intention to establish a new club with Blake as its chairman. Handing Blake a piece of parchment, Quirrell announced the formation of a duel club, leaving Blake astonished and questioning the implications of this proposal. Despite his reservations, Blake accepted the role, recognizing the potential benefits for his fellow students, albeit wary of Quirrell's underlying motives. He resolved to inform Dumbledore of this development, given Quirrell's increasingly peculiar behavior. Upon reaching Dumbledore's office, Blake was greeted with unexpected news. Dumbledore shared that an old friend had received Blake's letter and, impressed by his innovative ideas, had passed a manuscript to Blake as a gift. This revelation added another layer of intrigue to Blake's already complex situation at Hogwarts. Dumbledore handed Blake an envelope and a suitcase with a smile. "This is a part of the collection he selected for you. You can ask him for it after you finish reading." Blake, puzzled, asked, "Couldn't it be under an untraceable stretching charm?" "How did you know?" Dumbledore was surprised. "I guessed," Blake replied nonchalantly, though he couldn't very well admit he had received similar enchanted boxes before. "Curious," Blake ventured. "May I ask the name of your old friend?" "Now, I can tell you, my boy. Have you ever heard of the legendary alchemist?" Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "Nicholas Flamel!" Blake exclaimed with feigned astonishment, recognizing the name from his chocolate frog card. "The very same Nicholas?" "Yes, that's him. You might not be familiar with him since you're new to the wizarding world, but there are few in our world who haven't heard of this great alchemist," Dumbledore explained, his voice filled with admiration. Blake felt honored as they continued to discuss Nicholas Flamel. Suddenly, Dumbledore shifted the conversation. "What did you want to discuss with me today?" "Oh, I almost forgot." Blake quickly retrieved the parchment Quirrell had given him and handed it to Dumbledore. "Quirrell asked me to start a club and recruit students to join. I agreed initially to avoid raising any suspicions, but if you think it's inappropriate, we can always reject the idea. That way, Quirrell won't suspect anything." Dumbledore, aware of Blake's need to maintain his disguise in front of Quirrell, nodded in understanding. "You're handling the situation well, Blake. If you had refused Quirrell outright, he would have grown suspicious. It's wise not to startle the snake prematurely." "So, what should I do?" Blake asked, genuinely unsure. "Do you want to help him?" Dumbledore asked, a mischievous glint in his eye. Blake nodded, intrigued. Dumbledore leaned in. "The task I have for you is to establish this club as Quirrell has requested, and then make it thrive." Blake stared at Dumbledore, his blue eyes wide with disbelief. If the man before him wasn't Voldemort in disguise, then Dumbledore must have lost his mind. However, Blake knew better. Neither Voldemort nor Dumbledore were mad. They each had their intricate plans and strategies. Sitting in front of the room of requirement, Blake muttered to himself, "These schemers, always plotting. They're nothing like me, so straightforward and honest." He set aside the bookcase and Nicholas Flamel's reply, then eagerly opened his system space. Without hesitation, he took out a vial of Felix Felicis, the lucky potion, and took a drop. "Nothing is more important than opening treasure chests," Blake declared, especially with 2 supreme chests waiting in his system space. "System, open 2 supreme treasure chests for me," he commanded. "Ding, opening supreme treasure chest for the host," the system announced. "Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining the magical Gubrathian fire." "Ding, opening another supreme treasure chest for the host." "Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining a blueprint for the Eye of Agamotto." Blake's eyes sparkled with excitement. The Gubrathian fire, known as the Eternal Flame, was an advanced form of fire magic that never extinguishes. Only a select few wizards could wield such powerful magic, Dumbledore being one of them. It was rumored that the fire Dumbledore used to fend off Inferi in the cave with Harry in the original story was this ancient flame. Holding out his left hand, Blake summoned a hovering red flame above it, feeling its intense heat. Blake's eyes sparkled with excitement as he held the Gublai Immortal Fire in his hands. Its astonishing attack power, combined with his own Gandalf-inspired prowess, meant that his fire attribute spell damage would see an epic increase. Is it possible that fire magic is more suited to me? He pondered aloud. I should seek out Grindelwald one of these days and learn his gas stove technique. With that, Blake carefully stored the Goublai Immortal Fire and turned his attention to the second reward, the Eye of Agamotto. However, Blake was uncertain whether this was the Eye of Agamotto as depicted in the comics or in the movies. If it was the latter, it would mean possessing the Time Stone itself, granting him the ability to travel through time at will. The very thought filled him with exhilaration. Eagerly, he examined its blueprint, but 10 seconds later, his excitement waned. Excuse me. Despite the boost from the lucky potion and his alchemy skills, which were nearing an intermediate level, he realized he could only comprehend a mere tenth of the blueprint's intricacies. Blake clenched his fists in determination. If this was the case, then it was imperative that Nicole Flamel could not die. His journey was just beginning, and the mysteries of the Eye of Agamotto and the Goublai Immortal Fire promised a path filled with adventure and discovery. With a renewed sense of purpose, Blake set his sights on mastering these powerful artifacts, unaware of the challenges and revelations that lay ahead. Chapter 94. The Infinite Energy of Goublai Immortal Fire. Nicholas's Dilemma. In the Room of Requirement, amidst the Fantastic Beasts section, a young girl tilted her head, observing Blake with curiosity. At that moment, Blake was holding a large bag of ground turtles, preparing to feed the bowtruckles that resided in a holly tree he had transplanted into the room. The young girl, intrigued by the green creatures, had initially wanted to taste them, wondering if they might crunch like chicken. However, Blake had promptly dissuaded her from the idea. Instead, Blake offered, "Would you like some fish?" The young girl nodded eagerly. Her interest in the bowtruckles was more about trying something new rather than actual hunger. For her, the succulent salmon that Blake had in his system warehouse, originally intended for bears, was far more appealing. As Blake glanced around the Room of Requirement, he noted the limited number of magical creatures present. He mused about the need to create more pokeballs to capture and bring back additional fantastic beasts, envisioning a more vibrant atmosphere. Then, taking out a holly branch given to him by a bowtruckle, Blake planted it in the ground and snapped his fingers. A mass of crimson flames, the Goublai Immortal Fire, hovered above the branch. Unlike the destructive Fiendfire curse, Blake controlled the Goublai Immortal Fire with precision, ensuring it did not harm the holly branch below. This flame, known for its eternal nature, offered unparalleled utility beyond mere destruction, especially for alchemists. Alchemy required a consistent and powerful source of heat, and the Goublai Immortal Fire, with its temperature rivaling that of the Fiendfire curse, could purify materials to a much higher quality. Its ability to melt alchemy-specific metals, which ordinary flames could not, was a significant advantage. However, the most remarkable aspect of the Goublai Immortal Fire was its potential to provide infinite energy, a feature that made it truly worthy of being considered a supreme treasure. Lost in thoughts about the future applications of the Goublai Immortal Fire, including powering alchemy puppets indefinitely, Blake was startled when the young girl, an ice phoenix in disguise, suddenly consumed the flame in one gulp. Ah? Blake stared at her, bewildered. Where did my fire go? How could such a powerful flame just disappear? Chirp, chirp, eat, delicious, is there any more? The young girl looked at Blake, sparks still flickering on her beak. No, but you're a frost phoenix. Shouldn't you be afraid of fire? Blake asked, puzzled. Chirp, 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 phoenixes afraid of fire? Are you sure? She responded, equally baffled. But this is the Goublai Immortal Flame. It's not ordinary fire, Blake protested. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Is this supposed to be hot? She questioned, unimpressed. Blake sighed, realizing that to a creature like her, even the formidable Goublai Immortal Fire was just another flame. Indeed, no matter its power, to you it's still just fire. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Exactly. Phoenixes are not afraid of fire, she chirped happily, settling the matter. Blake, scratching his head, confidently stated, Yes, as long as I have sufficient physical strength and magical power, I can produce endless fire. With a snap of his fingers, a cluster of Goublai fairy fire reappeared on the holly tree branch. Gulu! The frost phoenix chirped inquisitively, as if asking for more. Observing the Gubli fairy fire vanish swiftly, Blake mused, "This fire is unquenchable. Can you truly digest it?" He reached out to touch the frost phoenix's belly, which was ice cold. The phoenix pecked at him in response. "Hey, did you just peck me?" Blake exclaimed. "Chirp, no touching there," the phoenix retorted. Meanwhile, a conversation unfolded elsewhere. "They're dreadful," one voice said. "I actually think it's a fitting punishment for their breach of school rules," another countered. "There's no need to be so upset with them. They're just two foolish kids," third voice added. The door to the room of requirement swung open, revealing Cassandra and an exasperated Hermione. After a harrowing night in the Forbidden Forest, Cassandra's mental state had remarkably stabilized. Having survived such terror, she wondered what else could possibly unsettle her now. Yet there was indeed someone who could. Blake. At that moment, Blake was attempting to place a letter into the beak of the young phoenix. "You can find him, right?" he asked. The phoenix, brimming with pride, transformed into a faint blue light and vanished the next second. "Huh? Blake, why are there red feathers on the young phoenix's wings?" "They weren't there yesterday," Cassandra observed, puzzled. The phoenix, predominantly blue, now sported a few dazzling red feathers at the tips of its wings. "I fed her some fire, and she changed a bit," Blake explained. The ancient eternal fire he referred to was not meant to be extinguished. Thus, even after the phoenix ingested it, it could only assimilate it gradually. Blake noticed several changes: the appearance of red feathers, the addition of Gubli Immortal Fire to her skill set, and an increase in her attribute points and magical power. This unexpected development indicated that the Gubli Immortal Fire had a fortifying effect on her body, much to Blake's surprise. "Feed her fire?" Cassandra and Hermione looked at Blake as if he were mistreating a pet. Blake, feeling misunderstood, clarified, "It's not that I wanted to experiment. She eagerly consumed my alchemy fire and then inquired if there was more." "She's an ice phoenix. Can she really consume fire?" Cassandra questioned. Blake replied with pride, "What are you talking about? She's a phoenix. Since when are phoenixes afraid of fire?" Changing the subject, Blake took out some ground turtles and fed them to the soundless bird perched on Cassandra's shoulder. He then casually asked Hermione, "Why were you so angry earlier?" "It's because of Harry Potter and Ronald Weasley," Hermione exclaimed. Harry blatantly broke the school rules, and though it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, with him being selected for the Quidditch team and receiving a broom from Professor McGonagall, the fact remains that they initially erred and broke the rules, yet they were proud of it. "I couldn't help but reprimand them." "But they said I have no other friends," Hermione fumed. Blake sighed. "Oh, you've forgotten what I told you again. Once you start lecturing, it's true that few classmates will want to befriend you." "That's impossible. Then why did you befriend me? Don't you dislike my lecturing?" Hermione challenged. Blake replied with a hint of sarcasm. "Hey, that's because you have nothing to lecture me about." Indeed, Hermione had nothing to teach Blake that he didn't already know or couldn't do better. Although Hermione had initially brought up the topic of school rule violations, she found herself at a loss for words when facing Blake. Despite his embarrassing situation, Blake quickly shifted the conversation away from his misdeeds, much to Hermione's chagrin, who still harbored the urge to punch him for his antics. Blake, satisfied with acquiring a silver treasure chest, steered the conversation towards Harry's new broom, a Nimbus 2000, a detail that made him ponder why he hadn't received a broom himself. Dumbledore had yet to fulfill this promise, leaving Blake to compensate the school for every broom he used during practice, under Captain Marcus's insistence that it was necessary for his training. However, upon learning that Marcus crafted brooms at home, Blake's guilt vanished, understanding Marcus's motives and thanking him for the brooms with increased fervor in his practice sessions. Blake's attention then turned to a letter from Nicholas Flamel, which he had read numerous times, marveling at Flamel's alchemical prowess. Flamel's ability to enhance a simple bracelet without adding new ingredients, turning it into a crystal bracelet +2, left Blake in awe and deep contemplation about how to convince Flamel to continue his work with the Philosopher's Stone, hoping to extend his life and further Blake's own alchemical skills. Blake considered getting involved in the plot to secure the Philosopher's Stone himself, but he knew Flamel might not accept it and could potentially report him to Dumbledore. He questioned Dumbledore's decision to destroy the stone, suggesting a ruse to deceive Voldemort instead, preserving Flamel's life. Blake reflected on Flamel's possible desire for death after living for over 600 years, having experienced all that life had to offer and reaching the pinnacle of alchemy. He speculated that for Flamel, death might be a welcome rest. However, Blake saw an opportunity to rekindle Flamel's interest in life by presenting him with new challenges. He drafted a blueprint for a Pokeball, a concept he hoped would intrigue Flamel, and penned a letter expressing his desire for guidance and sharing his new idea. By proposing this new project to Flamel, Blake aimed to provide the alchemist with fresh goals and reasons to continue living, effectively engaging Flamel's expertise and curiosity in a manner that could potentially alter both their destinies. Blake was deeply engrossed in thoughts about alchemy, convinced that Nicholas Flamel, with his insatiable curiosity for the art, would be unable to resist delving into the research of any blueprint he received, especially one as complex as this. However, Blake also knew that such a sophisticated blueprint couldn't be fully deciphered in a casual manner. This meant that Nicholas Flamel was likely to remain preoccupied with it for some time, postponing any thoughts of mortality. Blake had already planned his next move. If Nicholas Flamel eventually concluded that the blueprint was unfeasible, Blake would send a more detailed version, claiming it was his latest innovation. He was confident that this would rekindle Flamel's interest, allowing Blake to, metaphorically speaking, farm more treasures from him. The thought of the blueprint had been a lingering puzzle in Blake's mind, one he couldn't solve. Yet he was able to conceive further developments, a fact that would surely impress Flamel and perhaps even earn Blake a treasure chest in gratitude. Blake felt as though Flamel had unlocked a new realm of possibilities for him. He was certain that Flamel wasn't ready to face death just yet. And even if Flamel managed to fully decipher the blueprint of the Pokeball on his own, Blake had another ace up his sleeve, the blueprint for the Eye of Agamotto, specifically its core refinement process, a section so complex that Blake himself couldn't comprehend it. He pondered how much of it Flamel would be able to understand. If Flamel found it incomprehensible, it would suggest that there were even greater depths to alchemy yet to be explored. Blake wasn't entirely sure if this core part involved the Time Stone, but he considered the possibility unlikely. If questioned about the origin of the blueprint, Blake planned to say he discovered it in the Room of Requirement. The room was known to house a vast collection of discarded items, mountains of what many would consider rubbish. Despite a significant portion being consumed by his levitation cloak, the remaining debris was still substantial. It wouldn't be far-fetched, then, for Blake to have stumbled upon such an unusual blueprint among the myriad of discarded items, right? Chapter 95, The Dilemma of Being Surrounded by Dark Lords. Blake didn't have to wait long before the young girl returned with a response. According to Chingnam, Nicole May had changed locations again. Blake was momentarily speechless. Having a lot of real estate certainly gives you the freedom to move around as you please, he thought. Fortunately, Chingnam's tracking skills proved to be superior to Fox's. Despite Nicole May's relocation, she managed to quickly find him, delivering Blake's letter of gratitude along with new inquiries. The young girl also brought back a reply from Nico Flamel to Blake's latest question. Without giving the young girl a chance to rest, Blake handed her another large envelope. "I appreciate your hard work. Please take this," he said. Ching rolled her eyes, feeling slightly aggrieved that she had just returned and hadn't even had the chance to eat a single fish before being tasked with another errand. Nevertheless, she accepted the letter. Having just returned from Nico Flamel's, she didn't need to search for his location again and left Hogwarts directly via apparition. Watching the spot where the young girl vanished, Blake stroked his chin thoughtfully. This should keep Nicholas May occupied for a while, he mused. Opening Nico Flamel's reply, Blake felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of delving deeper into the world of alchemy. Blake held the parchment, pondering his next steps. Forming a new society at Hogwarts required approval from a corresponding supervisor and, crucially, Dumbledore's permission. With these prerequisites met, students could proceed with the official formalities. The final step involved advertising on the bulletin board to recruit members. Blake realized that he would be the one running these errands, caught in the schemes of both Voldemort and Dumbledore. He couldn't help but suspect that Dumbledore, ensuring his involvement, might be playing a deeper game, possibly even colluding with Voldemort. Quirrell mentioned it was at the end of the corridor on the 3rd floor, didn't he? But there's nothing there. Blake muttered to himself, regretting not asking Cedric for help earlier. Well, it's not surprising for Hogwarts to have a secret door or two. Drawing his wand, Blake prepared to use an exploration spell he had learned from Grindelwald. As he probed the walls, the seemingly solid barrier at the end of the corridor parted like a pair of doors, revealing a hidden passage. A beautiful girl with curly hair emerged, a look of frustration on her face. "Good day, Penelo-senpai," Blake greeted her warmly. Penelo looked up, her spirits lifting slightly upon seeing Blake. "Hello, Blake. What brings you here? You seem troubled," she inquired, noticing his curious gaze. "It's nothing major, just some issues with a club," Penelo replied, trying to dismiss her concerns. "Club?" Blake's interest was piqued. Although he had been tasked by Quirrell to handle some club-related matters, and Dumbledore had somehow coerced him into agreeing, he was still in the dark about the specifics, including where to officially register the club. Now, with Penelo, an acquaintance well-versed in these matters, standing before him, Blake saw an opportunity to gather the information he needed. "Perfect. Penelo-senpai, I was actually looking to inquire about clubs," Blake said, seizing the moment. Penelo's demeanor brightened at Blake's interest. "You're interested in joining a club? I'd recommend the Charms Club. It's usually by invitation from Professor Flitwick, but I'm sure he'd make an exception for you. He often mentions you during our sessions," she explained, her enthusiasm evident. Blake was taken aback by Penelo's eagerness, especially as she enthusiastically linked arms with him, ready to guide him towards the Charms Club. In the Charms Club, Blake spoke with a hint of caution. "It's not a good idea." He felt the gentle pressure in his arms and sighed internally. This development is really something, he thought, but then he caught himself. "No. Focus, Black. Remember your goals." "Why not?" "The Charms Club is fascinating," Penelo, the senior member, inquired with a hint of disappointment. "I'm sorry, Penelo-senpai," Blake replied. "I don't plan to join any other clubs for the time being, because I might not have the energy to participate in other club activities soon." Blake had a strong belief in the dueling club's potential. It wasn't just about his reputation drawing people in. The dueling club itself was inherently appealing. After all, when Lockhart announced the formation of the dueling club in the original story, nearly every young wizard in the school rushed to sign up, eager for the thrill of dueling. Moreover, with the recent buzz around Quirrell, Blake was confident that announcing his own dueling club would attract a significant number of students. As the club's president, he anticipated being too occupied to even consider joining another club. Driven by a mix of ambition and personal interest, Blake had even requested a week off from Quidditch practice to focus on this new endeavor. Marcus, upon hearing the news, had celebrated by drinking an extra glass of pumpkin juice at dinner, joking about the exciting times ahead. "What are you planning to do next?" Penelo asked, her curiosity piqued. "I'm starting a club. I've got permission from a professor and from Professor Dumbledore himself," Blake shared, his excitement barely contained. "Really? That's wonderful. Hogwarts hasn't seen a new club in ages," Penelo exclaimed, her excitement evident. She reminded him that students could join multiple clubs as long as the schedules didn't conflict. "What club are you creating? And who's the advisor?" she inquired further. "The club I'm forming is the Dueling Club, with Professor Quirrell as the advisor. He's asked me to be the president of this new club," Blake explained. Penelo's reaction was a mix of surprise and admiration. "No wonder people say you're Quirrell's favorite student." This comment made Blake's skin crawl, as it reminded him of an unsettling comparison to Voldemort, a favorite student of a Dark Lord. "I'm definitely on the side of good, so why do my mentors have to be so controversial?" he thought, recalling the dark pasts of both Dumbledore and Voldemort. I'm new here and could use some guidance. Could you help me? Blake asked, hoping to leverage Penello's experience. Of course, Blake. A dueling club sounds amazing. And when you start, you must invite Professor Flitwick as a guest. He was a dueling champion in his youth. Penello's enthusiasm was infectious. With Penello's help, the process became much smoother. They first located the student union, then met with its chairman to review the professor's files and register the new club. They also secured permission to use the school bulletin board for announcements, a privilege not extended to ordinary students without approval. Finally, they applied for a venue for the club's activities. Each club had its own space, though some, like the Charms Club, only required a classroom due to its focus on spellwork and not needing much space. Blake was determined to find the perfect venue for the dueling club, envisioning a place where students could safely engage in the art of dueling, learning both the theory and practice under his and Professor Quirrell's guidance. The need for a larger venue was apparent, but the best option available seemed to be a large classroom, sufficient for members to engage in gobstones. However, Blake, considering the actual requirements, decided to apply for not one but 2 large classrooms for the dueling club. Penello, a senior member, had suggested a large classroom as it would accommodate many people for dueling practice. Blake, after a moment of contemplation, shared his ambitious plan. The head of the student council, a tall boy from Slytherin, scrutinized Blake for a long moment before cautioning him about the potential of losing the venue if it proved too large for the club's actual size. This rule was in place to prevent the wastage of public resource as considering the limited number of classrooms available for club activities. Blake acknowledged the rule, understanding its necessity, yet he harbored concerns that even 2 classrooms might not suffice. He envisioned the auditorium as the ideal location, anticipating a large turnout for the club. Despite the student body president's skepticism, he did not obstruct Blake's request. He reasoned that if the club failed to attract a sufficient number of members, the venue could simply be reassigned. Blake spent a busy afternoon securing the venue, all the while keeping in mind his broader strategies involving figures like Voldemort and Dumbledore. Penello, who had been by Blake's side throughout the process, eagerly inquired about the club's registration. Blake seized the moment to invite her to join as the first member and even offered her the position of vice chairperson. Penello was taken aback by the offer, especially since she had recently faced disappointment in the Charms Club election. Despite her loss, Blake's offer presented a new opportunity, and his praise of her qualities, beauty, generosity, kindness, and bravery, only solidified his choice. Blake's proposal was met with hesitation from Penello, but she ultimately accepted, excited about the prospect of joining the dueling club and taking on a leadership role. This development pleased Blake immensely, as it meant he would have support in managing the club's affairs. Establishing the club was initially a strategy to divert suspicion from Professor Quirrell and to uncover his intentions, but it had quickly become a venture with its own set of challenges. With Penello's acceptance, Blake felt a weight lifted, grateful for the assistance in navigating the complexities of running the club. Penello looked around, her mind racing with possibilities. The realization that she only needed to play her part in the future filled her with excitement. "Okay, let's work together, senior sister," she exclaimed with enthusiasm. "You go and post the announcement on the bulletin board, and then distribute the leaflets," Penello was instructed. I'll go directly to recruit members," she quickly agreed, understanding the weight of Blake's popularity. She knew that with Blake announcing the establishment of a new club, support would flood in. The incident involving Snape had already earned Blake the gratitude of many young wizards. They would show up in support of Blake's endeavors, even if just out of loyalty. And this wasn't just any club. It was a dueling club. Penello sensed that this club was destined for greatness, which is why Blake had secured 2 large classrooms. She had no objections whatsoever. With a stack of leaflets in hand, senior sister Penello departed, leaving Blake to embark on his first recruitment mission to the Hufflepuff common room. Upon entering, Blake was greeted by the sight of numerous young wizards scattered around the room. Wasting no time, he raised his hand high and called out, "Attention, everyone! Attention! All eyes on me. I have an important announcement to make. After a brief cough to clear his throat, he continued with renewed vigor. I've created a new dueling club. Blake's announcement echoed through the common room, capturing the attention of every wizard present. His confidence and the intriguing prospect of a dueling club sparked an immediate interest among the students. Chapter 96. I am Voldemort's favorite student. The announcement of the dueling club immediately captivated the young wizards in the common room, their excitement palpable as they crowded around for more details. Dueling club? Is that for real? One asked, eyes wide with anticipation. Absolutely, Blake responded with infectious enthusiasm. In the dueling club, Professor Quirrell will teach us the art of combat, focusing on various fighting techniques. Plus, you'll have the opportunity to practice during club meetings. As the buzz of excitement grew, Blake noticed Cedric peering outside. Without hesitation, he dashed out and returned, dragging the handsome senior back into the fray. You're joining us, right? Blake asked, his enthusiasm catching Cedric off guard. Well, if it doesn't conflict with Quidditch practice, Marcus might not be too keen on letting people skip, Cedric hesitated. Marcus? Ask him if he knows the iron armor curse, Blake challenged. No. I mean, he should, but then he must join too. He's graduating soon and doesn't know the iron armor curse. It's dangerous out there, Cedric. Do you really want to attend his next match with a bouquet of white flowers? Blake, are you cursing me? Marcus stormed in, overhearing the conversation. He was brandishing his broom, a look of indignation on his face. Marcus, isn't that your beloved broom, the one you supposedly sleep with? Blake teased, dodging Marcus's attempts to hit him with the broom. Rubbish! Who said I sleep with my broom? Marcus retorted, his face turning a shade of red. Caught you blushing, Marcus. Can't handle a bit of teasing? Blake taunted, earning a mix of laughter and gasps from the surrounding crowd. Blake, you're dead, Marcus threatened, but his attempt to retaliate was futile. In a surprising turn of events, it was Marcus who ended up on the ground, showcasing Blake's superior dueling skills. See, this is why you need to join the dueling club. With proper training, you too can have skills like these, Blake boasted, earning applause from the onlookers. Cedric, impressed, gave Blake a thumbs up. You truly are Professor Quirrell's favorite student. Even a seventh year like Marcus couldn't best you. Blake's smile vanished, replaced by a shiver of discomfort. Cedric, let's not mention that again, okay? Despite the awkward moment, Blake's demonstration had its intended effect. Applications for the dueling club flooded in, leaving Blake with the tedious task of sorting through them. As chairman, he had no intention of handling the paperwork himself. However, realizing he lacked a team to delegate to, he reluctantly enlisted Cedric's help, promising that all Hufflepuff applications would be his responsibility. I need to promote the club to the other houses, Cedric. As chairman, my duties are endless, Blake explained, leaving Cedric to grumble about the unfair distribution of work. As Blake ventured out to spread the word, he encountered Cassandra and briefed her on the dueling club, hoping she would help promote it within Slytherin. Despite the house's apparent animosity, Blake knew the importance of inclusivity. After all, every student deserved the chance to defend themselves, regardless of house allegiance. Blake decided to delegate the responsibility of spreading the word about the dueling club to Cassandra for Gryffindor. He believed that Gryffindors, with their inherent bravery, would eagerly embrace the opportunity to learn combat skills. Blake also entrusted Hermione with the task, hoping it would serve as a chance for her to engage more with her peers. He was concerned that without making an effort to connect, Hermione might find herself isolated in the future. However, he cautioned her against letting her tendency to lecture take over. As the chairman, Blake had efficiently distributed the workload among others and made his way back to the room of requirement to focus on his own matters. The dueling club had indeed sparked interest among many young wizards, and word of mouth was all it took to get students to sign up. Blake was confident that the student union would handle the influx of applications without needing his intervention. In the evening, the president of the student union, a tall Slytherin boy, was taken aback by the mountain of registration forms presented by Penello. The sheer volume of interest in the dueling club was unexpected, and the sight of the forms caused a stir among the student union members. They were overwhelmed by the prospect of processing such a large number of applications, a task they hadn't anticipated being so demanding. Pinello then revealed that the pile he brought in was only from Ravenclaw, implying that there were even more applications from the other houses. This revelation was met with disbelief and a sense of dread among the union members, including the president, who realized the workload might require his direct involvement. The situation escalated when Harry, Ronald, and Hermione arrived, each carrying their own stacks of registration forms from Gryffindor, followed by Cassandra, Goyle, and Crabbe with forms from Slytherin, and finally Cedric, who brought in Hufflepuff's applications. The student union was astounded by the overwhelming interest from the entire school. At dinner, Blake was pleased to overhear conversations about the dueling club, indicating its popularity. However, he was momentarily puzzled by the absence of his dessert, only to discover Cedric, with cake crumbs at the corner of his mouth, trying to suppress a laugh. Blake, realizing the playful theft, responded with a light-hearted gesture, tapping the table with his fingers, signaling the start of a friendly banter. In the next moment, an array of desserts materialized in front of him once again. Cedric's expression soured instantly. "Unbelievable! Why do the house elves favor you so much?" he exclaimed. Meanwhile, at the faculty table, Dumbledore observed the lively discussions among the young wizards about the dueling club with a content smile. That young man Blake has managed to organize it so swiftly. Impressive, he thought to himself. Quirrell, on the other hand, seemed almost invisible, blending into the background with his usual timidity. Snape, who usually preferred the solitude of his own company, made a rare appearance in the auditorium that day. However, he chose to sit beside Dumbledore. "What are your thoughts on this dueling club?" he inquired, his voice barely above a whisper. "I believe it's a fine initiative." Dumbledore responded, pausing to sip his sweet honey water. "That club was Quirrell's idea. I'm certain he harbors ill intentions," Snape interjected, his words laced with suspicion. Dumbledore replied softly, "If I thought his intentions were purely malicious, I wouldn't have endorsed the club so readily." This took Snape by surprise. "You have an ulterior motive? But why place Blake directly under Quirrell's scrutiny?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I have faith in the boy, Severus. Those who underestimate him are bound to be caught off guard," Dumbledore stated, his voice firm yet gentle. Snape's expression turned stony, signaling the end of their conversation. Back in the auditorium, amidst the ongoing discussions about the dueling club, Blake was preoccupied with the desserts before him. Suddenly, a faint blue light illuminated the area, and a magnificent bird appeared before Blake. Its long tail feathers inadvertently swept Blake's pudding onto the floor. The assembly of young wizards gasped in awe, having never witnessed such a splendid creature. "That's Blake's phoenix," someone shouted, causing a stir throughout the auditorium. Rumors of Blake possessing a phoenix had circulated before, but few had seen it with their own eyes, and Blake had never confirmed it. Now, with the phoenix's majestic appearance and magical aura, there was no room for doubt. Blake, however, seemed unfazed by the commotion. He didn't even glance at the system notifications about the treasure chest. After feeding the phoenix a few pieces of cake, his attention shifted to a long parcel left on the table, accompanied by a note. "Heard you're heading to a Quidditch match but lack a broom? Here's a gift from me. Also, the blueprint you sent was fascinating." Cedric, eyeing the package, exclaimed, "Is that a broom, Blake? You finally have your own broom. Marcus will be thrilled." Marcus, patting Cedric on the head, added, "I'm quite pleased myself." He then jokingly lamented the future loss of his pocket money now that Blake wouldn't need to borrow brooms. After the phoenix had its fill of cake and grew uncomfortable under the gazes of the onlookers, it vanished from the dining table. "Open it, Blake," Marcus urged, eager to see if the package indeed contained a broom. Without hesitation, Blake unwrapped the package right there on the dining table, revealing a stunning, metallic broom. "Wow, this is incredible, but what kind of broom is this?" "I've never seen anything like it," he marveled. The broom, with its sleek metallic design, was unlike any he had encountered before. Blake, who had always felt a peculiar disconnect from wooden objects, found this metallic broom resonating with him. Upon closer inspection, Blake recognized the craftsmanship. This isn't just any broom. It's been crafted with exceptional alchemy, he realized, astounded. It was a creation of Nicholas Flamel himself, devoid of any model number due to its unique origin. While others were captivated by the broom's exquisite appearance, Blake was intrigued by the alchemical mastery it represented. Gazing thoughtfully at the broom in his hands, Blake caught Dumbledore's eye, who looked back at him with a sense of relief. It was a significant moment. Nicole Flamel had crafted Blake's broom personally. This gesture signified that Blake had earned Nicole Flamel's full acceptance, a feat Dumbledore couldn't quite fathom how the young wizard had achieved. Nicole Flamel, renowned for his alchemical prowess, had never before taken it upon himself to create an alchemical artifact for personal use. "After dinner, let's take it for a spin," Marcus said, his fists clenched in excitement. "Sure," Blake agreed without hesitation. Flying on the broom would not only be exhilarating, but also an opportunity to test its capabilities. More importantly, it would offer him insights into Nicole Flamel's alchemical techniques, a prospect that intrigued him deeply. The idea of flying on a broom crafted by an alchemist as legendary as Nicole Flamel was thrilling. Blake knew that every curve, every enchantment woven into the broom, held secrets of ancient alchemy waiting to be unraveled. This wasn't just a test of the broom's performance. It was a chance to connect with the very essence of alchemy that Nicole Flamel had mastered over centuries. As the evening approached, anticipation grew. The thought of soaring through the sky on a masterpiece of alchemy, feeling the wind rush past, and experiencing the freedom of flight filled Blake with an indescribable excitement. This was more than just a flight. It was a journey into the heart of alchemy itself. Chapter 97. Dumbledore's Surprise. A cool breeze swept across the Quidditch pitch as Blake soared freely on a broom crafted by Nicholas Flamel. He was thoroughly impressed. The broom could handle his maximum magical output without a hitch. Unlike when casting spells with his mithril wand, which often heated up and emitted a beeping sound under strain, this broom remained as stable as a mountain. Clearly, Nicholas Flamel's craftsmanship was unparalleled. Despite its unremarkable speed compared to Harry's Nimbus 2000, for Blake, this broom was exceptional. To others, using his wand felt like wielding an unwieldy 80-caddy knife, utterly ineffective. Similarly, no one else could harness the full power of this broom. In Flamel's eyes, Blake was the ideal conduit for this magnificent broom, a perfect match for its capabilities. With a burst of speed, Blake pushed the broom to its limits, leaving onlookers in awe. "I felt like I was watching a low-flying jet plane," one spectator remarked. "What's a jet plane?" another asked, puzzled. "Review your Muggle studies," Marcus chided, squeezing Cedric's shoulder in excitement. "With this speed and skill, we're unbeatable." Cedric managed to wriggle free from Marcus's grip, nursing his sore shoulder. He marveled at how Blake had effortlessly taken down Marcus, a feat that seemed impossible given Marcus's muscular build. The dueling club had become an overnight sensation at Hogwarts, attracting nearly all the students. The novelty of dueling had captivated even those with little interest in the sport, making the club the largest society at Hogwarts and surpassing the Gobstone Club. Blake had successfully fulfilled Quirrell's assignment. Meanwhile, Quirrell was locked in his office, conversing with his reflection in a mirror. He expressed confusion to Voldemort, hidden within his scarf, about the undue attention Blake was receiving. Voldemort explained that Blake's talent, coupled with his naivety, made him an easy target for manipulation. More importantly, Dumbledore's unusual interest in Blake hinted at a deeper connection. Quirrell was shocked to realize that Blake might be the child Dumbledore had adopted, making him a potential vulnerability for the otherwise formidable headmaster. Voldemort saw this as an opportunity to exploit Dumbledore's newfound weakness, drawing parallels to his manipulation of Barty Crouch Jr. He believed that even someone as principled as Dumbledore could be swayed by the prospect of protecting a loved one, suggesting a sinister plan was in motion to use Blake against him. Voldemort, brimming with confidence, declared, "This is our chance." Quirrell, in a hushed tone, agreed, "Yes, Master, you will undoubtedly succeed." However, Voldemort paid little attention to Quirrell's praise, instead revealing, "Actually, today brought an unexpected opportunity." Quirrell, intrigued, asked, "What is it?" "That broom, the one Blake Green received. Did you see it?" Voldemort inquired. "Yes, master," Quirrell responded. "It's a broomstick crafted by an alchemist," Voldemort revealed. Quirrell was puzzled, thinking it normal for Dumbledore's adopted child to receive such a gift, assuming Dumbledore would spare no expense. Voldemort, reading Quirrell's thoughts, chastised him. "Fool, why don't you see? If Dumbledore wanted to gift his adopted child a broomstick, he wouldn't need someone else to make it. He's a master alchemist himself. Moreover, if Dumbledore had made the broom, he wouldn't have had it delivered by a phoenix in the Great Hall. He could have given it to Blake Green privately. The fact that it was sent by mail suggests it was made for Blake by someone else. I suspect it's a gift. A gift from Dumbledore's alchemist friend to Blake Green." Quirrell gasped. "Nicholas Flamel?" "Exactly. The broom was most likely sent by him. If that's the case, it implies Nicholas Flamel holds Blake in high regard. Otherwise, he wouldn't personally craft such an extravagant gift for a child," Voldemort explained. With this revelation, Quirrell realized the significance of Blake Green's relationship with Nicholas Flamel. This connection could potentially lead them to the Sorcerer's Stone, which Dumbledore had secured on the 4th floor with various protective measures, including Quirrell's own contributions. However, the authenticity of the stone Dumbledore placed there remained questionable. "So, Master, why did you suggest he form a society?" Quirrell inquired. "I want him to experience the exhilaration of being admired for his strength. Trust me, Quirrell, no one can resist that feeling. It's the first step in winning him over," Voldemort shared. Quirrell, astonished, realized, "So when you teach him to duel in class, you're doing your utmost to nurture his talent?" Indeed, despite his raw skills, Blake shows exceptional talent, surpassing even Barty Jr., Voldemort acknowledged, keeping to himself the broader implications of Blake's influence. Once Blake gained a significant reputation at Hogwarts and the admiration of his peers, his ideas could sway many. Voldemort envisioned Blake as not only a potential ally, but also a weapon against Dumbledore, reminiscent of Barty Jr.'s betrayal of his father. This strategy presented a no-lose situation for Voldemort, who also harbored a fascination with Blake's unique power, especially after experiencing its effects firsthand. Voldemort concluded that Blake was akin to a treasure trove. By winning him over, they could swiftly turn the tide in their favor, reaping immense benefits. "Next, what should we do?" Blake inquired, his curiosity piqued by the unfolding plan. "The next step is to wait. If Blake Green seeks you out, then we're halfway to our goal," Voldemort explained with a hint of anticipation in his voice. "Why is that?" Blake asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because he is the chairman of a significant society. However, if the chairman lacks dueling skills, convincing the public of his competence will be challenging," Voldemort elaborated. "Therefore, if he approaches you for private training, it will prove his vulnerability to the allure of power." "I see," Blake murmured, the gears turning in his head. "And if he doesn't come?" Blake pressed, seeking clarity on all possible outcomes. "Then he will likely lose his position as chairman. It would also indicate his indifference towards power. Such a person would merely serve as a tool for my plans. But trust me, nobody is immune to the temptation of power," Voldemort confidently asserted. As Quirrell, under Voldemort's influence, pondered these plans, a knock echoed through the office. Could that be him? Quirrell wondered aloud, a mix of excitement and apprehension in his voice. "Let me handle this," Voldemort decided, taking full control of Quirrell's body to greet their visitor. Upon opening the door, they were met by Blake, who had skillfully activated his intermediate acting mastery skill, a talent he had honed alongside other abilities, such as proficiency with intermediate excavators. His expression was a calculated mix of nervousness, panic, and determination, convincing even to those who might have seen through lesser performances. Regrettably, Blake thought, he lacked the natural disposition for a dramatic sigh, but his performance was convincing enough to deceive Voldemort, who refrained from using legilimency. Blake did crave power, but not in the way Voldemort might have expected. The dueling club had proven beneficial, and he was not about to abandon his ambitions. His plan was to strike a deal with Voldemort, secure control of the dueling club, and claim it as his own once Quirrell was out of the picture. Blake had anticipated Voldemort's intentions and chose this moment to confront him. "Oh dear Blake, what brings you to me?" Quirrell, Voldemort inquired, feigning ignorance. Blake couldn't help but shiver at the overly affectionate address. "Professor Quirrell, I seek to become stronger," he stated with unwavering resolve. A spark of interest flickered in Quirrell's, Voldemort's eyes. "And why is that? What drives this desire?" He probed, barely concealing his delight. "I want to truly earn my title as chairman of the dueling club. I'm not yet strong enough. There are those who doubt my capabilities," Blake confessed, playing into Voldemort's expectations. "I understand, Blake. Worry not, I will assist you in gaining the power you desire," Quirrell, Voldemort promised, a sinister undertone to his words. Following their conversation, Blake was instructed to visit Quirrell every night at 8 o'clock for dueling lessons. After sharing this development, Blake was rewarded with a golden treasure chest. Dumbledore, who had been listening, was left speechless by the revelation. Blake had not only uncovered Voldemort's ambitions, but had also become entangled in them. This was a development Dumbledore had hoped to avoid. "Since you had already deduced his plan, you should have informed me first. I would never have exposed you to Quirrell had I known," Dumbledore lamented, realizing the complexity of the situation they now faced. Dumbledore had initially agreed to Blake's proposal of assisting Quirrell in establishing a dueling club, seeing it as a strategic move to monitor Quirrell's actions and, by extension, discern Voldemort's plans. He never intended for Blake to become deeply entangled in the situation. However, Blake's decision to seek out Voldemort directly had irrevocably changed the dynamics. Blake was now deeply involved, making it difficult to extricate him without raising Quirrell's suspicions. Dumbledore was silent, his mind racing with concerns. If it weren't for his fear that deviating from the prophecy could lead to unforeseen consequences, he might have considered bypassing Harry Potter altogether to confront Voldemort directly. "You shouldn't have approached him, Blake," Dumbledore finally said, his voice tinged with a mixture of disappointment and concern. "But I wanted to help you," Blake protested, his voice earnest. "He's trying to win me over, to turn me against you. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." Looking into Blake's sincere eyes, Dumbledore felt a surge of mixed emotions. He was touched by Blake's loyalty and determination, yet he was also pained by the thought of Blake being in danger. "Regardless, this is a perilous path you've chosen, Blake," Dumbledore said, his tone grave. "Engaging directly with Voldemort and his followers puts you at great risk." Blake's decision to confront Voldemort was driven by a desire to protect Dumbledore and thwart Voldemort's plans. However, this bold move had inadvertently placed him in a precarious position, complicating Dumbledore's strategy and increasing the stakes of their covert battle against the dark forces. Chapter 98, Voldemort, Are You Determined Enough to Accept a Stronger Force? "At least when most of his attention is focused on me, it will save everyone a lot of trouble," Blake said sincerely. Dumbledore looked at Blake, astonishment evident in his eyes. "Is that really what you think?" he asked, touched. What a kind-hearted child. Suddenly, a notification chimed in Blake's mind. An extremely moving emotion was detected. "Congratulations to the host for receiving a golden treasure chest." Dumbledore, however, voiced his concerns. "But have you considered the dangers of your actions? What if he discovers your true intentions, or worse, decides to harm you?" Blake scratched his head, a bit embarrassed. "I've thought about it, and I still chose to proceed. I guess I haven't dwelled much on the potential dangers." Dumbledore sighed, a mix of guilt and affection in his voice. "You're such a naive boy." Another chime sounded in Blake's mind, signaling the detection of emotions and the reward of another golden treasure chest. Despite the rewards, Blake felt a pang of guilt at Dumbledore's next words. "No, I still can't condone this. It's too dangerous, and it's not your burden to bear." "You shouldn't have to risk yourself," Dumbledore said, deeply moved by Blake's willingness but still unwilling to put him in harm's way. Dumbledore had lost too much in his life, including his sister Ariana, and he couldn't bear the thought of losing Blake, who had become like family to him. "But Professor, what if it works?" Blake asked, trying to present another perspective. "With your help, wouldn't it succeed?" Dumbledore countered, his determination clear. I just can't bear to put you in danger again. Professor, things are more complicated than you think. Even other professors have started to suspect your adoption of me. Don't you think he's aware of our relationship? Blake argued. The moment he changed his teaching approach and began favoring me, I knew I was on his radar. Avoiding involvement isn't an option anymore. If I'm destined to be dragged into this, I'd rather dive in headfirst and take control. Blake's calm and logical explanation left Dumbledore in shock. The child's wisdom and courage were beyond his years, embodying the virtues of all 4 Hogwarts houses. It was clear why the Sorting Hat had placed him in Hufflepuff. Blake's kindness, loyalty, intelligence, curiosity, bravery, and cunning made him a perfect fit for the inclusive house. Professor? Blake's voice pulled Dumbledore from his thoughts. Realizing his lapse, Dumbledore responded, You're right, Blake. Perhaps I should be more discreet about our relationship to protect you. Blake shook his head. It's not your fault, Professor. And why should we hide? An elder adopting a child as his heir is nothing to be ashamed of. Why should we keep it a secret? Because of enemies? I refuse to live in hiding. Blake's words resonated with Dumbledore, highlighting the boy's bravery and conviction. Despite the dangers, Blake was ready to face them head-on, embodying the true spirit of a hero. In the midst of a complex situation, Blake found himself in a conversation with Professor Dumbledore, discussing the precarious position they were in regarding Voldemort. Dumbledore, with a heavy heart, looked at Blake, marveling at the young boy's willingness to shoulder such a heavy burden. Blake, however, reassured him, outlining a strategy that involved playing a delicate game of deception with Voldemort. He proposed to feign dissatisfaction with Dumbledore to keep Voldemort's interest in winning him over, thus keeping himself out of immediate danger. Dumbledore, though resigned, acknowledged Blake's astuteness in uncovering Voldemort's scheme so swiftly and urged him to remain vigilant. Dumbledore then mentioned he had something to prepare for Blake, something crucial for his protection, especially when facing Professor Quirrell. This item, revealed to be a pair of glasses, was designed to shield Blake from Voldemort's potential use of legilimency, a magical skill that allows one to probe into another's mind. Despite Blake's proficiency in occlumency, a defensive countermeasure to legilimency, the glasses served as an additional layer of protection, at Dumbledore's insistence. Blake, who had never worn glasses before, found himself needing to explain the sudden change to his friends. He concocted a simple yet plausible explanation, attributing his newfound need for glasses to the extensive reading he had been doing. This explanation was readily accepted by his friends, given Blake's known diligence in his studies and the commonality of nearsightedness among wizards, a condition not easily remedied in their world. As Blake continued his dueling lessons with Quirrell, who was under Voldemort's control, he noticed that the lessons were focused on legitimate defense against the dark arts spells and combat skills, with no instruction in dark magic. Blake interpreted this as Voldemort's way of testing him, gauging his ambition and desire for power. This insight into Voldemort's intentions revealed the complexity of their interactions, with each move carefully calculated to navigate the dangerous game they were playing. Blake found himself in a difficult position. He was determined to prove himself to Voldemort, yet the task at hand was daunting. That evening, in a dimly lit room, he stood before Professor Quirrell, who was, in fact, Voldemort in disguise. The air was thick with anticipation as Blake broached the subject of learning more powerful spells. Professor Quirrell, these spells. Blake hesitated, searching for the right words. What are you trying to say? Quirrell, with Voldemort's cold and calculating voice, inquired. Blake noticed a change in Quirrell's demeanor. The man hardly bothered to maintain his usual facade in front of him. Although I've learned a great deal of advanced combat techniques from you, Blake began, his voice growing more confident. I want to become stronger. Do you have any more powerful spells to teach me? Quirrell, or rather Voldemort, seemed to ponder this for a moment. Yes, there are more powerful spells, but are you truly prepared for what they entail? Blake nodded without hesitation, his resolve clear. Very well, Quirrell conceded. I will teach you a spell of greater power. Your willingness to try will be the true test of your determination. Blake understood that this was yet another of Voldemort's tests. The spell he was about to learn was undoubtedly dark magic, possibly even one of the 3 unforgivable curses. Such magic required the caster to harbor intense negative emotions, like deep-seated hatred or a strong desire to kill. Failure to harness these emotions would render the spell ineffective and diminish Voldemort's interest in him. Blake was determined not to let that happen. He knew that to maintain Voldemort's interest, he had to prove his worth. Otherwise, he risked being discarded like Quirrell. Quirrell raised his wand and aimed it at a wooden target a short distance away. "Pay attention to the incantation," he instructed. "Cut out the guts," he exclaimed, and with a loud crack, a gaping hole appeared in the dummy's abdomen, its insides hollowed out. Blake frowned, repulsed by the spell's gruesome nature. He was familiar with it, but had never had the inclination to use it due to its vile and bloody effects. Yet, here he was, being tested on his aptitude for dark arts with this very curse. "Your turn," Quirrell urged. "Remember, you must feel enough hatred in your heart to want to eviscerate your opponent." Blake took a deep breath, mentally cursing Voldemort for putting him through this. He focused, channeling his emotions, and pointed his mithril wand at another intact dummy. With a mixture of determination and revulsion, he uttered the spell, dug out the intestines, and cut out the belly. Chapter 99. The Prodigy of Dark Magic. With a resounding crack, Blake unleashed a devastating spell, the gut ejaculation curse, on the wooden target. In an instant, a gaping hole appeared in its belly. Then, with a sharp click, the upper half of the target cleanly separated from the rest, having been sliced in half by the curse with precision. It was evident that Blake's mastery of the dark spell surpassed that of Voldemort's influence on Quirrell. Quirrell, limited by his own capabilities, could only channel a fraction of Voldemort's power. In contrast, Blake, wielding this dark magic for the first time, outperformed Quirrell significantly. This feat not only demonstrated Blake's innate talent for dark magic, but also hinted at a potential that was bursting at the seams. Voldemort, observing from afar, couldn't contain his excitement. He saw in Blake a natural-born dark wizard, one whose potential for embracing the dark arts was limitless. Now, Voldemort's task was to unlock the Pandora's box within Blake's heart, to unleash his innermost desires and evil inclinations, much like he had once done with Barty Crouch Jr. If successful, not even Dumbledore would be able to prevent Blake's descent into darkness. On the contrary, Dumbledore's attempts to intervene might only hasten Blake's fall. As Blake contemplated his achievement, a notification chimed in his mind. Ding! An extremely joyful emotion was detected, followed by, Ding! Congratulations to the host for getting a golden treasure chest. Blake mused over Voldemort's reaction, noting the Dark Lord's attempt to remain composed despite his evident joy, which resulted in only a golden treasure chest being awarded. Blake ambitiously thought, sooner or later, I will make you yield the supreme treasure chest. Looking at the destroyed wooden target, Blake found himself puzzled. He had merely tapped into his acting skills, yet the spell's power was overwhelming. His proficiency in acting had significantly aided his ability to harness negative emotions, which, in turn, amplified the spell's potency. By immersing himself in the role of a deranged individual with a perverse joy in gutting, Blake had unleashed a spell of terrifying strength, leaving even Voldemort ecstatic. This led Blake to question his own aptitude for dark magic, though he quickly dismissed the thought, humorously considering himself a harmless little badger. However, this experience illuminated for Blake the idealistic nature of magic in this world, where the intensity of one's emotions directly influenced the power of their spells. This was true for both dark magic, requiring malevolent intent for spells like Avada Kedavra and the Cruciatus Curse, and positive magic, where spells like the Patronus thrived on happiness. An intriguing thought crossed Blake's mind. If someone were to cast dark curses in a state of madness, would his system reward him with treasure chests for the emotional intensity directed at oneself? Quirrell, mistaking Blake's contemplative silence for awe at his own spell's power, allowed himself a slight smile, believing Blake longed for such power. Very well, Blake, you've shown me your resolve, Quirrell said, planning to teach Blake more the following night. He admired Blake's quick adaptation and emotional control, seeing great potential in him for the dark arts. Thus, Blake's journey into the depths of magic continued, with each spell casting and emotional exploration opening new doors to understanding and power, all while under the watchful eye of those who sought to guide him down a darker path. Blake, having experimented with black magic on a wooden target, resolved never to use it on a living being, recognizing the potential for horrific outcomes. After the experiment, he didn't return to his dormitory. Instead, he made his way to the room of requirement, emerging with a small, oddly lustrous ball. Utilizing materials found within the room, he had synthesized 2 Pokeballs of normal quality. One was designated for Xiongda, hoping it might unlock new potency, in the creature whose abilities had seemed maxed out. The other was reserved for a more ambitious target, the king of the horned camel beasts. The following day, a Saturday free from the usual academic obligations, Blake organized a barbecue outside Hagrid's cabin. The guest list included a few friends who had supported Blake in promoting the dueling club, such as Cassandra, Hermione, and Hannah, alongside first-time attendees like Cedric, Pinello, Marcus, Wynne, and Roger. Hagrid, contributing privately sourced ingredients for the event, extended invitations to Harry and his close friend Ronald as well. Blake, known among his friends for his exceptional cooking skills, took charge of the barbecue. As the meat sizzled on the grill, he retreated to Hagrid's hut to prepare desserts, his culinary expertise promising an array of tantalizing flavors. The aroma wafting from the grill and the hut was so enticing that it tested the patience of those who had yet to experience Blake's cooking. Wayne, unable to contain his eagerness, suggested he taste the food first, claiming his discerning palate could judge its readiness. Hagrid, however, firmly stationed himself by the grill, insisting on following Blake's instructions to the letter. He recalled past instances when impatience led to less-than-perfect barbecue experiences, and how waiting for the right moment significantly enhanced the taste. This memory bolstered his resolve to wait, assuring everyone that the brief delay would be well worth it. When Blake finally emerged from the hut, he inspected the meat on the grill and added a final touch with a sprinkle of unknown spices. Only then did Hagrid serve the barbecue, which was met with overwhelming approval. Marcus was moved to tears by the flavor, lamenting the missed opportunities to enjoy such culinary delights sooner. Wayne and Roger expressed similar sentiments, regretting not having experienced Blake's cooking despite sharing a dormitory with him. Cedric, more reserved but equally impressed, quietly enjoyed the barbecue, prioritizing eating over expressing his astonishment. Pinello, taking small, appreciative bites, regretted missing a previous dinner invitation from Blake, now fully aware of what she had missed. The meal concluded with Blake presenting his homemade desserts, which, like the barbecue, earned him high praise. The combination of crispy sweet treats and the savory barbecue solidified Blake's reputation as an exceptional cook, leaving his friends eagerly anticipating their next meal together. Blake sat leisurely, cradling a cup of tea, savoring its warmth and aroma. In the quiet of the moment, he delved into his system space, a treasure trove of rewards he had amassed from his adventures and encounters with figures like Dumbledore and Voldemort. Among these, he had managed to craft 2 more coveted diamond chests, setting aside the silver and bronze ones. He had learned, through experience, that these lesser chests often contained basic materials and skills of unexpected utility. For instance, his proficiency in intermediate acting skills, initially deemed trivial, had proven invaluable when combined with spellcasting. Hermione, observing Blake lost in thought, mistook his contemplation for concern. "What's troubling you?" she inquired, her curiosity piqued. Blake, pulling himself back from his reverie, responded, "I've been pondering over a question." "And what might that be?" Hermione asked, her interest evident. "How many uses does dragon's blood have?" Blake mused, his tone serious. Hermione, taken aback, replied, "But the 13 uses of dragon's blood were discovered by Dumbledore and his colleagues. Didn't you struggle to recall them during Snape's potion class?" "Exactly," Blake affirmed, "which is why I'm contemplating a 14th use for dragon's blood." This revelation left Hermione and those who overheard in astonishment. The prospect of discovering a new application for such a well-studied potion ingredient was both daunting and thrilling. "So, what is this new use?" Hermione pressed, her eyes wide with anticipation. The others, too, leaned in, eager to hear of this groundbreaking discovery. Blake, pausing for effect, finally spoke. "Have any of you ever tried Mao Shui Wang?" As night descended, Blake bid farewell to his friends and made his way to the forbidden forest's edge, his heart warmed by the thought of the power he sought, not through dark magic, but through the mastery of magical creatures, plants, and alchemy. His ambitions, he felt, far exceeded those of Voldemort. Ensuring solitude, Blake donned his invisibility cloak, cast a bubblehead charm for protection, and took to the skies with the levitation ability of his cloak. His destination, the beach by the Forbidden Forest, where he planned to tame a llama. Under the moon's glow, Blake revealed himself at the cave's entrance, confident that the horned llama within would detect his presence. As anticipated, the sound of heavy footsteps approached, and soon, a towering horned llama emerged, its demeanor cautious yet curious, thanks to Blake's unique archdruid aura. Blake stood unguarded before the creature, a smile gracing his lips. Yet, the llama sensed the latent danger. A smaller llama, perhaps a third the size of the first, joined the scene, its gaze fixed on Blake. It observed the standoff but hesitated to act, intrigued by this unfamiliar human. In front of it, the horned camel suddenly let out a roar. To most, it was merely an ordinary sound. However, to Blake, who possessed the unique ability to understand the language of animals, it conveyed a clear message. Humans, standing before you is the king of the Purple Horn tribe, the sovereign of the Eastern Forest, El Marchitit Agcarius, the horned camel announced. Human, who might you be, to stand in the presence of our clan's king and yet not introduce yourself? Blake was momentarily taken aback. Goodness, whose name could possibly be longer, and are we really going to compete over this? He thought to himself. Clearing his throat, Blake prepared his response with a hint of theatrical flair. Let it be known to the king before me, Blake began, his voice resonating with a newfound gravity. Standing before you is none other than the Thunderborn Lord of the Hogwarts houses, the King of Beasts, the unyielding sovereign of the Forbidden Forest, the ruler of the Treeguard tribe, the Lord of the Phoenix, the black and white son of the devil, Gellert Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Blake Dumbledore Grindelwald. Upon hearing Blake's elaborate introduction, the horned camels were visibly astounded. Their mouths hung open in disbelief. Although the significance of many titles was lost on them, the sheer grandiosity of Blake's claimed identities was unmistakable. The king born from thunder, what brings you to our domain? The horned camel king inquired, his tone now laced with a genuine curiosity and respect. Blake's response had not only bridged the gap between their worlds, but also paved the way for a dialogue underpinned by mutual recognition of sovereignty. What had begun as a potentially hostile encounter was now evolving into an exchange between two leaders, each with their own storied titles and realms. Chapter 100. Accidentally Tamed Another Brood. The new king of the Purple Horn tribe. I am determined to achieve great things, and you, my favorite, will be an invaluable ally in realizing my ambitions, Blake declared with earnest conviction. How presumptuous! Do you dare attempt to tame our lord? This is a grave insult to us. An ordinary horned camel bellowed, its roar reverberating through the sky. At this signal, a large group of horned camels emerged from the woods and hidden caves along the beach, all fixing their intense gazes on Blake. It seemed they were ready to pounce at any moment and tear him to shreds. King born of thunder, you wish to tame me? The king of the horned camels asked, eyeing Blake with a dangerous look. Yes, Blake responded calmly. If you are unconvinced, let your clansmen come at me. However, I must warn you, as the king born of thunder, I will inevitably cause significant casualties among your tribe. The horned camel king surveyed his tribe, a flicker of doubt crossing his eyes. This human's boldness in facing them alone suggested a formidable power. Such a confrontation could indeed lead to heavy losses for his people. As the king of the Purple Horn tribe, he possessed an inviolable majesty. Allowing his clansmen to rush forward in a futile attack would only diminish his stature as their leader. With a low growl, he signaled for the horned camels to step back and lower their heads. Fight me, king born of thunder. If you defeat me, I will follow you. But if you lose, you will perish here, the horned camel king proposed, having weighed his options carefully. Victory would resolve the matter favorably, but defeat would not justify a reckless assault by his tribe, which would only result in unnecessary bloodshed. Blake chuckled, appreciating the king's noble stance. He had initially planned to use a pokeball for a forceful taming, but now he decided to honor the king's dignity with a fair challenge. "Very well, I accept your challenge," Blake agreed. "My king, you need not fight him," a llama named Acaster protested. "Stand down, Acaster. Do you doubt my strength?" The king dismissed Acaster's concern and stepped forward with regal dignity. In the Horned Camel tribe, where strength was paramount, showing weakness was not an option. The king fixed a silent, predatory gaze on Blake, its sharp horns glowing with a golden light that showcased its formidable destructive power. Blake, taking the challenge seriously, drew his mithril wand, recalling how he had once sent a mountain giant flying tens of meters away. The thought of the giant's immense weight and the power required to launch it such a distance filled him with a sense of the impending battle's intensity. With a lightning coil wrapped around his wand, Blake prepared for the confrontation. The Horned Camel King's pupils contracted at the sight. This human's ability to wield the power of thunder was indeed formidable. The aura emanating from the silver stick was disconcerting, suggesting that the king himself might not withstand many hits. Acknowledging Blake's strength, the Horned Camel King realized the wisdom in facing him alone. The king halted, his purple pupils intently focused on Blake, deciding to rely on his speed to gain the upper hand before Blake could unleash his thunderous power. With a sudden burst of speed, the Horned Camel King charged, moving as swiftly as lightning. Blake, wearing a levitating cloak, swiftly ascended into the air, narrowly avoiding the attack. The king's incredible speed was evident, highlighting the threat he posed. Suspended in the air, Blake's cape billowed around him. He raised his wand, ready to cast a powerful weather spell. Thunderstorms quickly gathered, enveloping him in a display of raw elemental power. From a distance, Blake resembled a deity wielding the forces of nature, ready to engage in an epic battle with the king of the horned camels. As if the god of thunder himself had descended upon the world, the scene was electrifying. The Horned Camel King, upon halting, cast a backward glance filled with despair. The realization dawned on him. His opponent could fly, wielding a thunderous power beyond comprehension. The king knew that when Blake swung his right hand down, it could very well signal his own demise. Boom! 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 Despite the odds, the Horned Camel King charged once more, this time leaping towards Blake in a last-ditch effort to reach him. The jump was higher than anyone, including Blake, had anticipated. However, it was still not enough. "Unfortunately, compared to my lightning, you are too slow," Blake remarked as lightning struck the Horned Camel King mid-air. The brilliant flash forced all the horned camels to shield their eyes. When they reopened their eyes, the sight that greeted them was one of despair. Their once mighty king now lay motionless on the sand. Blake descended gracefully from the sky, addressing the fallen king. "Horned Camel King, do you concede?" Acaster, a common horned camel, roared in frustration. "You can fly! My king cannot!" "Acaster, flying is a skill, just as I pride myself on my speed," the Horned Camel King interjected, attempting to rise. "O king born of thunder, you have bested me. I shall aid you in your noble quest. Moreover, by defeating me, you have earned the right to be the new king of our Zijiao tribe, as per our customs." Blake looked down at the Horned Camel King with a mix of surprise and skepticism. "Cunning Agcarius, you wish for me to protect your tribe?" The Horned Camel King, now identified as Agcarius, met Blake's gaze. "Thunderborn King, by defeating me, you inherit the mantle of our tribe's king. The choice to protect the Purple Horn tribe or leave is yours." With a wave of his wand, Blake cast a potent healing spell, enhanced by druidic magic, upon Agcarius. The king watched in awe as his wounds healed instantly, his respect for Blake deepening. "Very well. I accept your proposition," Blake declared, rising into the air once more. "People of the Purple Horn tribe, I have defeated your king, Agcarius. I am your new king. Should anyone challenge this, let them step forward." The horned camels exchanged glances, but none dared to challenge Blake. Their king, the strongest in centuries, had been defeated. How could they hope to stand against this human, a master of thunder? Soon after, the tribe bowed their heads in submission to Blake. "Agcarius, now fully acknowledging Blake's new status, inquired, "My king, what will become of us?" Blake surveyed the horned camels with a determined gaze. Recognizing their combat prowess, but understanding he couldn't oversee them directly, he decided, let them continue to recuperate here. "Acasta, you and Agcarius will protect the Purple Horn tribe in my stead. Should you encounter any insurmountable trouble..." He then produced a small piece of mithril, letting it float before him. With a gentle rub of his hands, a group of crimson flames appeared, startling Agcarius with its intensity. The mithril gradually morphed under the ancient fire into 2 badges, each engraved with the image of a horned camel. Blake picked up the badges, and with his wand in hand, prepared to entrust them with a significant responsibility. Blake lightly tapped on the 2 badges, placing one in front of Acasta. "If you encounter trouble that you can't handle, just step on this badge. It will alert me that you're in need of assistance," Blake explained as he pocketed the other badge. This device was a simple piece of alchemy, enhanced with an advanced transformation spell to link the 2 badges together, enabling a basic form of communication. Should Acasta step on his badge, the one in Blake's possession would heat up, signaling an alarm. "As you command, my king," Acasta responded, his gaze briefly meeting Agcarius's before he skillfully rolled up the badge with the tentacles near his mouth. The horned camel's tentacles were as dexterous as human fingers, a trait Blake knew was often used to manipulate their food, typically fresh fish, into their mouths. "With that settled, let's depart," Blake announced. Agcarius cast a lingering look at his former ally. "Acasta, my instincts compel me to leave. Do not despair. Wang and I must go first. Take good care of our clan," he advised before he and Blake ventured into the forbidden forest, disappearing from the sight of the horned camels. Once enveloped by the forest's dense foliage, Agcarius inquired, "My lord, what is our destination now?" Blake retrieved a Pokeball, eyeing Agcarius. "Stand still. I want to test this," he said, his curiosity piqued about the device's capabilities. With a gentle twist and a toss, the Pokeball engulfed Agcarius in a flash, shrinking him and teleporting him inside the ball before returning to Blake's hand. Observing the Pokeball, Blake noticed the previously dim gemstones now glowing green, indicating a successful capture. Peering into the Pokeball, Blake could make out a miniature Agcarius, peacefully asleep, enveloped in a red mist that seemed to be a substance promoting biological evolution. "This appears to be a conversion of ordinary magic into a form that encourages biological growth, akin to druidic magic," Blake mused, impressed by the device's potency. Releasing Agcarius, Blake instructed, "Next time I summon you for an attack, do so immediately." Agcarius, still bewildered by the experience, nodded in understanding after Blake explained the Pokeball's function and its potential to enhance his strength. Mounting Agcarius, Blake commanded, "Forward," and they charged deeper into the forbidden forest, heading straight into Acromantula territory. This time, Blake remained passive as Agcarius, empowered and acting like a formidable tank, repelled any approaching spiders, inflicting heavy casualties among the Acromantula. Blake harbored no sympathy for these creatures, viewing them merely as a source of wealth. His plan was to raise a particularly strong Acromantula, one that would eventually overthrow Aragog and claim the throne, uniting the Acromantula under a new king. Meanwhile, an old man stood beside a large pit in a different part of the forest, lamenting the absence of Porgy's relatives. In his hand, he held a bowtruckle scratched its head in confusion. "No. My second uncle lives here? Why is the whole tree gone?" The old man crouched down, equally puzzled. As he stared at the large pit before him, he distinctly remembered a holly tree standing here, its branches teeming with bowtruckles. This community had existed for decades, and he would visit them from time to time. But now, not only had the bowtruckle vanished, but the tree itself was nowhere to be found. "Don't worry, Porgy. I'll find out what happened to them," the old man said, his brow furrowed with concern. A sense of foreboding filled his heart. Bowtruckles were indeed a rare species, making them prime targets for poachers who would capture these magical creatures to sell to greedy goblins at exorbitant prices. Goblins would then train the bowtruckles to assist in their nefarious lock-picking endeavors. The disappearance of an entire holly tree only added to his worry. He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was clear. They had been taken captive. The value of the bowtruckles and their home trees was too great for poachers to ignore. Just as he was grappling with this distressing thought, a series of thunderous footsteps echoed in the distance. "It's the footsteps of a horned camel," the old man exclaimed, his expression turning grave. Judging by the sound, this horned camel was significantly larger than the norm. Without hesitation, the old man tucked Porgy away for safety and dashed toward the source of the noise. Suddenly, a massive tree was snapped in half right before his eyes. A gigantic horned camel lumbered past, its presence alone a spectacle to behold. The old man's eyes widened in astonishment, not just at the sight of the creature, but because he spotted a child perched on the back of the horned camel. The situation was extraordinary, and the old man knew that this was no ordinary encounter. The presence of the sea, hilled on such a majestic creature, hinted at a story far beyond what he had initially imagined. Determined to unravel the mystery, he prepared to follow the horned camel, his mind racing with questions about the child's identity and how it all connected to the disappearance of the bowtruckles and their home.